29th, 2023 meeting of the Grafton Zoning Board of Appeals, 7:05 p.m. At this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Bill McCusker. Bill McCusker, Vice Chairman, who's going to run the proceedings this evening for the 40B meeting, or for the 40B applicant. So turn it over to him now, and Bill, take it from here.
Thank you. Oh, I got my own. Okay, welcome everyone. At this time, we'll open case number, what was it, 892?
892.
We'll open case number 892. I'll ask the clerk to read the petition.
The Grafton Board of Appeals has received a petition from 59 Pleasant Street Properties, LLC, for 59 Pleasant Street requesting the Zoning Board of Appeals grant a comprehensive permit under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40B, to allow under Chapter 40B comprehensive permit the construction of 104 rental units in 4 buildings, of which 25%, or 26 units, will be rented to low or moderate income persons and families. The board will conduct a public hearing on March 29th at 7 p.m. in the Grafton Library to consider this request and/or to take whatever action is necessary, including the granting of a finding, special permit, variance, or other necessary relief allowed under the zoning bylaw. Any person wishing to be heard in conjunction with this request should appear at the time and place designated or by letter to this board in time to be read at the hearing. Zoning Board of Appeals, Brian Waller, Chair, Kay Reed, Clerk, William McCusker, Vice Chair, Bill Yeomans, Peter Adams, and Mitali Biswas.
Okay, at this time, I ask the board to introduce themselves. You can pass the mic down to Mitali, and we'll start with Mitali and work our way down.
Hi everyone, Mitali Biswas, alternate member.
Kay Reed, Clerk.
Brian Waller, Chair.
Bill McCusker, Vice Chair.
Peter Adams.
Bill Yeomans, member at large.
Katrina and Dan, please.
Katrina Kosheville, CBA Secretary.
Dan Hill, Special Counsel.
And I think that's all for staff that we need to introduce. So the way we'll proceed, I'm actually out of practice here because I haven't been chairman in a while. Normally, the clerk will read the petition, but she's already done that. After the clerk's read the petitioner will have the floor and have the opportunity to present their case. There's ordinarily a time limit, but in the case of 40Bs, we waive that time limit. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the petition will have an opportunity to do so. Any letters in favor of the will be read into the record. We don't do that anymore. The letters are posted and made available, and everyone has the opportunity and should have already read them. Anyone wishing to speak, please approach the microphone. We really can't have outbursts. We're trying to conduct an orderly meeting, and it's more important that you approach a microphone, state your name and address, and this way the tape can hear you and everyone in the room can hear you. The opposition will also be allowed to speak, and letters in opposition will also be acknowledged. After all the evidence is presented, the board will enter discussion, will come up with a decision. That's probably not going to happen tonight. 40B cases tend to take many, many meetings. At any time, the case can be continued. That is likely to happen in the case of a 40B case. The board may ask questions from time to time. However, all conversations should be directed through the chair for this evening. For this hearing, for the duration of this hearing, I'll be the acting chairman. So at this point, we normally read the petition. That's already been done. I might normally turn it over to the petitioner now and give the petitioner the floor, but there is a matter that we need to address before we hand it over to the petitioner. There is the issue of safe harbor. Some of you may be familiar with safe harbor, but essentially safe harbor is a term that refers to the town of Grafton either attaining 10% affordable housing or attaining its production plan towards the goal of 10% affordable housing. Sometime in the past year or so, DHCD, the agency responsible for these things, certified that Grafton was in safe harbor through March of 2024. However, in the last week or so, DHCD had a meeting with our town administrator and informed us that, in fact, we are no longer in safe harbor. The problem being the primary development, what's known as Pine Street development. Although the building permit, I think, had been applied for, it had never been paid for, and if anyone goes by there, they know there's really no work going on there. So DHCD has basically said, you are no longer in safe harbor. Subsequent to that, our town council, our special counsel, Dan Hill, has reviewed what DHCD has had to say in the situation. He, quite frankly, disagrees with it. So there is an uncertainty about whether or not we are in safe harbor right now or not. And before I move on from that, I'll just offer, Evan, you want to add anything to what I just said?
No, you covered it.
Dan, I don't know if you want to add anything to what I just said?
I'm happy to explain it if you want me to, otherwise,
I think the gist of it, though, is that there is uncertainty with respect to whether or not we're in safe harbor. So, to the board, the normal procedure, the prudent procedure for any 40B hearing while in safe harbor would be for the ZBA to notify the applicant that we are in safe harbor. Okay, this preserves essentially the board's rights to use safe harbor as a means to deny or a means for conditions that essentially can't be appealed. I think that would be the prudent thing for us to do tonight. And with that in mind, I would ask for, and Dan, just your guidance, I think it's just a motion to notify the applicant that the town of Grafton is in safe harbor.
right, and a letter would follow tonight, a written letter to the applicant notifying the applicant.
Correct. So I'd entertain a motion for the zoning board of appeals, town of Grafton, to notify the applicant that we are in safe harbor.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Actually, I should just back up. Those 5 sitting members, does anyone have any reason to recuse themselves from this hearing? Okay, so we're all voting members. Any discussion? Thoughts, comments, questions? Hearing none, then.
We are going to go ahead, whatever this vote is, we are going ahead with the hearing.
Absolutely, yes, yep. All right, so we'll vote. Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Waller?
Yes.
Mr. Yeomans?
Yes.
Mr. Adams?
Yes.
Vice Chairman votes yes. So the Secretary will draft a letter, perhaps with guidance of council, to notify the applicant that we are in safe harbor. Okay.
Just make sure, guys, when you talk, that you have the mic, otherwise it's not getting picked up. Please, thank you.
It's going to be a hard habit to learn.
I know, sorry.
All right. Yeah, except for, thank goodness. So what we've just done is we're notifying the applicant that we believe we're in safe harbor. Whether we are or not, or let's just say this, if we definitely were and there was no question, we still would proceed as we're going to tonight, all right? You still would want to hear what the applicant has to say. Safe harbor just gives us the option possibly to deny this, or it affects to how we can condition what we're about to hear about tonight. So with that in mind, I think we'll turn it over to the applicant, and, well, you got the floor.
Hello, is this on?
It should be.
Good evening, everybody. My name, for the record, is Chad Gordon, and I'm here representing Eastland Partners, which is 59 Pleasant Street Properties, LLC. Tonight here I have Clayton Williams, an associate with me. He's just to the permitting department. I have also here Steve O'Connell. He represents Turning Point Engineering as well, civil engineer for the project. I'd like to first start off with how we ended up actually being here. This has been a lengthy process. This actually started back in December of 2021, believe it or not. We're actually the developers of the Elm Rock Estates community, which is off of Wheeler Road. We built a number of units, 6 homes which were affordable over there, and went to families in Grafton that qualified for affordable homes that are actually 4 bedrooms. So with the success of that neighborhood, we also had the idea of coming forth and acquiring another parcel and using our expertise, and we believe the site was a perfect candidate for a potential apartment community for workforce housing. We reached out to the town planner, the town manager, the housing trust. At this time, again, December of 2021 was kind of in the midst of COVID, as everybody knows. We started asking about, what do you guys think about this particular job? We're thinking of doing X number of units. We believe that the infrastructure and the traffic from the, a 500-foot flyover makes some sense. We'd like to try to explore, some the interest of doing a LIP process with the Board of Selectmen. Again, this is a little bit repeating what we've already done, in the last 15 months, but some of you in the audience might not know the process, and I think it's a little important just to kind of bring things up to speed again. So during our initial discussions, of course, we listened to the different department boards and listened to some of their comments and questions, and we did proceed with possibly going to the next step. So we engaged another design, thoughtful engineering process, and submitted to the selectmen to join a LIP process, which is a joint application to go forward with a potential housing community on Pleasant Street. Mind you, the LIP process allowed us to work closely hand in hand with the town boards, many of them anyways, the Housing Trust, the Selectmen, DPW, police and fire, and whatnot. And some plans were generated, and we brought forth to the Selectmen with some of our ideas, and we held public meetings. As you can imagine, me saying we've been at this for 15 months, we actually attended 7 public meetings with the Board of Selectmen to answer questions and show our community, which is definitely over time changed significantly when we first started. And why I say that, why it changed significantly, is that we had actually 3 public outreach meetings. So instead of just going directly with the town and saying what we want to do, we had to reach out to all the homeowners and some familiar faces in the room and meet with them and say, this is what we're potentially thinking, and we had to listen to their concerns and questions and whatnots. We actually engaged a traffic report in advance. Again, many of you in the audience might say it was during COVID times, but again, the report dictated some, some advancements, or it's like a 3.5% upcharge from the highest point to, in regards to COVID, which the Mass DOT uses. So we did that in advance, knowing that in the future it would eventually get to the ZBA, where the next round of review would happen, of course, and that's how we ended up here today. Of course, it wasn't peer reviewed at that level of the selectmen. Again, it's the, I call it the 100-foot flyover. We did this, we didn't see any concerns initially, but again, it gets professionally reviewed. Along the way, with working with the selectmen and some of the other boards in town, our proposal that was submitted to the ZBA carries a number of certain things that we're willing to do above and beyond. One of the most important things is considering this is an affordable community for workforce housing. Much like our success in Wheel Rock, we actually thought, what different things could we do that haven't been done potentially in Grafton for making these apartments more affordable to people. And over the time of some of the meetings, we've actually submitted to doing 50 and 60 and 80% AMIs for low, moderate income Grafton residents. So these are important, as we all know that the cost of living and it's so expensive these days. This is an important part of our community that we're proposing. And of course, I don't believe it has been done previously in town, but I could stand corrected. A lot of these things will be eventually talked about in a minute with Clayton Williams here. And I just want to also say that, working with the neighbors on Peters Way and a lot of the others, we learned a lot when I had the entire site staked in the field and surveyed, and with grades actually, elevations of berms and buffers, and we spent probably a good 2 or 3 hours potentially out there, kind of explaining things. Of course, by trade, I'm somewhat of an engineer. But that's how we came to this meeting tonight. We're donating 12-acre parcel, approximately almost 5 acres is going into open space. The ratio of density is very low at 8.3 units an acre. So there's a variety of good things that the selectmen and as well as us believe that it would be a fantastic opportunity. When we first started it, we thought that Grafton might possibly be close to possibly have safe harbor. With the recent news and the letters that were reviewed, Mr. Hill will send the appropriate information over us for review of that. But we would like to, continue to move forward with what we've already actually have submitted in front of everybody. So at no time should be any fear that I'd like to do something different if, per se, they fall out of safe harbor. What we have here is from 15 months worth of work dealing with the town of selectmen, the board of selectmen, the housing trust, and we believe it stands on its own with the merits of our submission to everybody here tonight. So when I turn this over to Clayton here, he has a great presentation that really stemmed from the last presentation from the select board. And it explains some of the large items of our experience and what we're doing for the town. Might be very helpful to some of us that just maybe tuned in town, as well as some of maybe the members on the board that might have been not available to see some of the presentations previously. So at this point, I'd love to turn it over to Clayton. And also, if there's any information that I can't answer or be put on the spot, I'm famous for writing the information down, and that's worked great for our community outreach meetings, and we respond appropriately to them. So if I'm caught in a deer in a headlight, I'll probably write it down, and then at the next meeting, I'll submit it in writing what my answer would be to alleviate it. So at this time, I'd love to turn it over to Clayton, and again, he can bring us up to speed of where the project sits currently, and through that process with the Board of Selectmen as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chad. Good evening, everybody. My name is Clayton Williams. I work in permitting and acquisitions for Eastland Partners. I put together a short presentation today. It's going to cover some of the points that Chad has already mentioned, but with some supporting graphics and information as well. So, as we're all aware, this project was permitted through the Local Initiative Program, or as a LIP, which at its core was really designed as a way to garner more public input. With traditional 40Bs, they get submitted to the ZBA, and that 180-day clock starts ticking. Using the LIP process allowed us to reach out to some of you in the crowd tonight, hold these extra meetings, kind of change our site plan, be a little bit flexible with our development proposal, and bring us to where we are today. So starting off with abutter outreach and involvement, as Chad said, we spent a good portion of time with the select board and with our neighbors. We attended 7 meetings, and we had a series of community outreach meetings. 2 of those were held at the town hall, where we gained some questions, comments, and concerns. We then memorialized those to the select board in a written format, as Chad said. And our last meeting was with a number of you out on the site. We called Turning Point, had them stake out some edges of buildings, edges of pavement. That way our neighbors could really see where these project elements lie. It's a lot easier to see it in the field than just looking at pieces of paper. We feel we did a great job at listening to the questions, comments, and concerns that you all brought to us. We changed our plans pretty significantly. We added a series of landscape berms, a really comprehensive landscaping plan to make the site beautiful. We also committed to using dark sky compliant lighting, which will limit the impact to abutting properties. We ended up shifting the whole project away from Peters Way to further limit impacts to our neighbors. We also changed our architecture to flat roof buildings, which would maintain consistency with existing building heights in the neighborhood. And then, as Chad said, we wrote up some pretty detailed memos that were submitted to the select board. So when we first started looking at this project and what could potentially fit here, this was one of the plans that we came up with. This was right before the town had come into safe harbor protections. This is 6 of our buildings, associated parking, and a small leasing center with 160 units. This is not what we are proposing here today. Once the town had, kind of come over the cusp of safe harbor, we pulled back our proposal, said, let's do 4 buildings with 104 units, which is a bit more in scale with the neighborhood. And that's how we got to this plan here. So this was our preliminary site plan we submitted to the select board. As you can see, we have approximately 30,000 square feet of green space between the edge of the project and Peters Way. Offsets to abutting properties are anywhere from 85 to 175 feet. So as a result of all those outreach meetings and negotiations with the select board, this is our current site plan. We have 104 units, 24 of which will be accessible from the ground floor. These earth berms that you can see along the western side and southern side of the property are at some points 14 feet tall. Those will also be planted with coniferous trees, so pine trees or spruce trees, to make sure that that buffer is not lost in the winter. We also added a series of garage buildings, one of which was strategically located over here, abutting Peters Way, to further limit the impact from vehicle headlights as people are turning into their parking spots. One of the other things we also committed to was remedying an existing drainage issue. Todd and Jeff submitted some pictures and a letter to the select board talking about an instance where some flooding from an existing culvert in Pleasant Street ended up finding its way into their backyard. So we will capture that existing flood water, send it into our stormwater management system and away from their property. One of the other big benefits of the LIP process was a sidewalk connecting Peters Way all the way up to Christopher Drive along the project frontage. This gives pedestrians in the neighborhood a safe place to walk away from vehicle impacts. We also added a small bus stop set back from the street approximately 25 feet to give school children in the neighborhood or potentially from this community a safe place to wait for the bus outside of the roadway. And lastly, we put in a significant walking trail shown here in brown that is connected from the new sidewalk back to the pre-existing walking trails in the rear of the property. So in terms of open space and density, as Chad said, we'll be donating approximately 40% of the property either to the town or to the land trust, whoever you as a board see fit. This will turn out to be 4.8 out of the 12.5 acres. We will also give deeded access for existing Grafton residents who wish to utilize the open space and trail system. We will also be setting aside a number of parking spaces right up here to the left of that garage for any pre-existing Grafton residents to use. It's pretty important to note that we have no wetland resource area impacts. We are not proposing any wetland fill. Those will all remain undisturbed, and we will be in compliance with the town of Grafton's 25-foot no disturb zone. While this may seem dense, when you think about it in the context of the entire 12.5 acre property, as Chad said, our density is approximately 8.3 units per acres. Our lot coverage is just about 25%. Previous proposals that have come before this board have had significantly higher density due to smaller property sizes. So I think now that we've covered some of the site, some of the real benefits that have come out of the LIP process and negotiations with the select board are increased affordability. So since we're in a LIP here, one of the things that the town is eligible for is local preference. So we will be able to set aside 70% of the affordable units, which comes out to 18, to people who either live in Grafton currently, work for a business in the town, work for the town, or have children who are already attending the school systems here. We'll go over some of the numbers with affordable rents, but in total, our increased affordability will save residents of this community $365,000 a year compared to market rents. And the largest savings are isolated to the 3-bedroom units. Per our discussion with the Affordable Housing Trust, that was a huge need in town. So I apologize for some of the small font here, but these Excel graphs basically compare the 50% AMI units, 60% AMI units, and then 80% AMI units to the market rents. So for this project, we have 5% of the total units restricted for individuals and families at 50% of the median income, 5% for individuals and families at 60%, and then the remaining 15% towards 80% AMI individuals and families. And that makes up our 25% affordable. So as I said before, we'll be saving residents of this community approximately $368,000 a year. And this was a direct benefit of the LIP process of the negotiations and discussions we had with the select board. So when you take this project as a traditional 40B, in which 25% of the units would be restricted to individuals and families making 80% of the median, you'd be looking at a savings of around $280,000. So there's an extra $100,000 a year in savings for the reserve at Pleasant Commons that were come up with as a result of our previous discussions and negotiations. So safe harbor is a big topic, whether the town is in it or not. Should this project get approved, it will extend your safe harbor status at least 1 year. It puts Grafton on a path for planned and responsible growth, and it really gives you, as the zoning board, the ability to determine your own future, which is a huge need. Being in safe harbor is a really important thing for towns in order to control growth and kind of manage where good projects are going and where bad projects aren't. So when we started with the select board, the first thing that I did was gave a municipal impact analysis presentation. So this gave the town a fiscal pros and cons of this project. It was first presented on March 3rd with the Affordable Housing Trust, and then a few weeks later at the select board. Our proposal estimated approximately $300,000 a year in net positive revenues as a result of this community. These will be going up over time as real estate taxes increase and also increases in sewer fees. Along with some of these fiscal benefits, the town would also receive new growth money, increases in your Chapter 70A to help school systems, and further housing production plan certification and safe harbor protections. Along with annual revenues from taxes and other sources, there are a number of one-time revenues that will come to the town. It ends up being just over $1 million in total. One of the things Eastland committed to was a donation of $100,000 or $25,000 per building to the town's general fund. This allows you to accomplish some initiatives that maybe have kind of fallen to the wayside as budget concerns have tightened. We also will be requesting a 50% reduction in sewer fees. We will be donating all of our savings back to the town into your general fund, increasing that donation to $360,000. We will still be paying $260,000 into the sewer department. That way they have adequate funding to maintain and expand the infrastructure as the town continues to grow. We also estimated somewhere in the neighborhood of $145,000 in building permit fees. And even though the Grafton Water District is a private entity, we'll be paying $370,000 in connection fees, which helps maintain and expand a system that a lot of Grafton residents benefit from. I think it's important to end on some of the experience that Eastland Partners has. We have been working in 40B for over 20 years. We have built rental apartment communities. We have built single-family home developments. We have also built duplex condominium developments under 40B. We intend to own and maintain this project. We're going to keep it in our own portfolio. We won't be selling this off to some out-of-state management company. We had a great experience working with a number of town boards on the construction of Elm Rock. We build our own houses ourselves, so we're able to control quality. We have 31 happy families currently living here at Elm Rock Estates. 8 of those homes ended up being affordable with a mix of 3 and 4 bedrooms. So that concludes my presentation. At this point, I'll turn it over to Steve to talk about some of the site plan considerations.
Thank you, Clay. Good evening. My name is Stephen O'Connell from Turning Point Engineering. I'll just take a few moments to go over some of the aspects that are specific to the property at 59 Pleasant Street. So what you see on the screen is the existing conditions of the site. So this is the bulk of the property, includes the development area. The topography slopes from Pleasant Street, which is here on the screen, to the east, towards the pond in the back. There's a large, significant drop-off topographically here, which really lended itself to our site layout design, which I'll get to. So the pond in the back is the wetland resource area that has been delineated. Just a little edge comes onto the property. The 25-foot buffer zone and 100-foot buffer zones are illustrated. This plan also illustrates some of the existing trails that exist on the property. The property is 12.51 acres. Approximately 5 acres of that is an existing hayfield. So you can see the tree line here. So this front portion, about 5 acres, is a field, typically grown and cut for hay. It is zoned in R20 and located within the Water Supply Protection Overlay District in town. The pavement on Pleasant Street in the proximity of the project ranges from about 24 to 25 feet wide. Most subdivisions in town require a pavement width of 24 feet to give you some perspective. We found the soil conditions on the site to be very favorable. They're rapid infiltration, hydrologic soil group A, which means they're sands and gravels, confirmed by test pits. As the result of the project, we expect the development to result in a fairly balanced site. So not an excess amount of material leaving the site and not an excess amount of material coming into the site and import. So a fairly balanced site designed as such. The layout plan, please. Okay. So here's the site layout plan. You can see 4 buildings, 1, 2, 3, and 4. The density for 104 units, resulting in a density of 8.31 units per acre, fairly low in my experience with multifamily housing projects. The building coverage represents 7.86% of the land area, with an impervious coverage, which means pavement and roofs for the buildings, to be 25%. We're proposing 204 parking spaces, which is 1.96 spaces per unit. We typically find that 1.7 is acceptable, but we wanted to provide a little more here, especially a few that would be donated to Grafton residents for access to the open space. So again, 204 spaces resulting in 1.96 spaces per unit. I'll quickly highlight here again, these are the spaces allocated for public access, and permanent easement will be granted. Close proximity to the trail that is proposed, that will connect to the trails in the back. Again, the trails tie into the proposed sidewalk here and along Pleasant Street for convenient access. Again, the bus shelter proposed is here. We have allocated areas on the site for snow storage, and there are 2 trash refuse areas, which will be self-contained in fences and landscaping. So one on this part of the site, and then one here on this part of the site, beneath, in front of the berm. If you could go to the next slide, please. You can probably go to the landscaping plan. We're just going to go to the landscaping plan, because I think what's an important part of the site layout and design was the attention and effort put into the landscaping. As I hope it's obvious to you, this is a very robust landscaping plan. You know, very specifically, starting here along Pleasant Street, above the proposed entrance, is a significant landscape berm. Again, that was a request that came out of the community outreach meetings from abutters, specifically on Christopher Drive. On this side of the site, on the southern side, also a very significant, more significant landscape berm. Again, reaching heights of 14 feet, and then landscaped on top of the berm. Again, to address concerns raised by some Peters Way residents, we wanted to respond. So in addition to the landscape berm, we're able to move much of the site features, which would be up on this screen, to the north about 35 feet. So in addition to those landscape berms, there's extensive landscaping. All of these symbols represent trees and shrubs. There are extensive foundation plantings around each of the buildings. There are parking lot trees. There are trees in the open space. There are trees and shrubs and plants along the walking paths. These are two stormwater basins, again, landscaped extensively as well. As part of the construction, because 5 acres of the site is existing agriculture, only about 2.5 acres of land clearing will be necessary. What's important about that is that we will be able to maintain a 25-foot buffer, which is the local bylaw, for a no disturb. Again, this wetland is associated with the pond, which is predominantly off the property, but the buffer zones of which come onto the property. So the 25-foot buffer back here will be maintained. Only a small portion of this building is within the 100-foot buffer. All other features except for stormwater will be within the 100-foot buffer. You go to the utility plan, please. It's going to be above, back before. A couple before. So the project. So the project will connect to the public water. We have a will serve letter, which means that Grafton Water District has acknowledged that they can service this project with their water infrastructure. So we will be connecting to the water main in Pleasant Street. We will also be connecting to the public sewer. The sewer will be collected on site in a gravity system and then conveyed to a small pump chamber in the back. The pump chamber will pump the sewer through a force main up to an existing sewer manhole in Pleasant Street. We've discussed this with DPW. The details we will get into for sure, but conceptually, it's certainly acceptable to the DPW. In addition to the water serving the buildings, we've identified a location on site for a fire hydrant. That location will be subject to review by the fire department. They may ask for a second hydrant, but we have no objection. Oftentimes those locations are selected by the fire departments because that's their expertise. Again, those conversations with those departments will happen along this process. Those of which that have not happened already, again, the buildings will also be serviced with a fire supply lines for sprinklers within the building. Could you go to the grading sheet, please? So what I want to just quickly talk about would be some stormwater features. So the stormwater system will be designed by peer review. The town's peer review, the board's peer review consultant is Graves Engineering. They do a very thorough job. The stormwater system was designed to meet the Massachusetts stormwater management standards and local town bylaws. One very important feature in Grafton is that we are required to size the stormwater system to meet the Cornell extreme precipitation rainfall totals, which are significantly larger rainfall totals than required by Massachusetts DEP. It's something we've always done on projects in Grafton as they require it, and we don't object. In fact, it's a nice feature to be able to say with confidence that the stormwater system will work, as in this case, we expect it to here. Part of this stormwater system design, as Clayton touched on, was to address an existing runoff and flooding issue. So there's a culvert here under Pleasant Street, which takes water from uphill behind Pleasant Street, parallel to Christopher Drive, and also some runoff in Pleasant Street that gets conveyed to this inlet. The inlet discharges the water onto the 59 Pleasant Street property, but due to the existing topography, the water gets pushed over into this corner. When the capacity of the area in this corner is exceeded, the water extends to the backyard of the property at 1 Peters Way. We've been privy to some photographs that are, very indicative of the flooding impacts that these residents feel. So with our stormwater system design, we propose to collect that water here, bring it into our drainage system. So again, instead of flooding their properties, it's allowed to collect in a depression here with a pipe conveying it all the way to the back to alleviate that concern. The grading that we propose in this area also will prevent that flooding to eliminate, again, an existing condition that affects an abutter. Just what I'll quickly touch on will be the sidewalk. The sidewalk along Pleasant Street connecting Peters Way to Christopher Drive, connecting into the existing project sidewalks, will also help encourage the stormwater runoff on Pleasant Street to be conveyed into the proposed drainage system, preventing additional from flooding that currently occurs. A lighting plan is currently being prepared by a lighting engineer. Will show photometrics that light will not spill over the property line. We'll have 0-foot candles at the property line. And I know that traffic is something of some concern. What I would imagine is that we will have a meeting dedicated to traffic. I'll let the board decide. Perhaps the traffic study will be sent for peer review. I will reiterate that new traffic studies are underway, and new traffic counts are underway for anyone who had concerns about traffic counts that were taken during COVID. So those results will be available to the board and to the public as soon as they are available to us, I would say prior to the next meeting. And happy to talk about traffic to the extent I think is reasonable without the traffic engineer here, but I believe it would be best to talk about traffic with the traffic engineers, in detail. But again, happy to talk about some of the components of the traffic tonight if the board wishes. So that concludes an overview of the site development from an engineering standpoint. And unless Chad has something to add, I think we're happy to turn it back over to the board.
I could talk for hours, but I'm not. We've got plenty of meetings to discuss a lot of technical things that are in the plan, so definitely turning it over to Vice Chair. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So the new traffic counts, that's something I hadn't heard of. So a new traffic study is being done, essentially, is that what I've heard?
Yeah. So we're privy to the comments through the public hearing process. There were a lot of comments related to traffic concerns, specifically that the counts were taken during COVID. What the public should know is that during COVID, Mass DOT put out guidelines that said that traffic counts taken should be increased between 0.9 and 2.4%. Our traffic engineer increased the traffic counts by 2.5%, so just slightly above the maximum range. The traffic counts taken previously were taken in July. July is an above average traffic month, so not only do we have traffic counts in an above average month, we also have a factor of 2.5 applied. That being said, for peace of mind and everyone's concern, new traffic counts are being taken. Those will be.
So that's really all that matters.
That's all that matters.
Yeah, new counts are, thank you. And I do agree, I mean, traditionally this board has dedicated a night to traffic, and we have always sent out for peer review, so both of those, as you know.
And what I'd like to share too, Mr. Vice Chairman, is that the traffic study was done when it was done because we thought it would be important for the select board during the lit process. It wasn't done so that it could be old now. It was done because it was important then, and it'll be important moving forward, therefore updated information.
Sounds good, thank you. Questions from the board? Mr. Yeomans?
Microphone,
No, go ahead. Mr. Yeomans?
microphone, you need the microphone.
I mean, you turn that way.
Yeah, give it to him. No, no, the- Battery's dying.
We can borrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, pass it down.
Mr. Yeomans, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In reviewing this project, I just have a couple of questions that came up. And I'd like you to better explain why you've gone to flat roofs when all of the pictures that I've seen in the past have been with the peak roof. And I know that it's been indicated that it was a concession to the neighboring community. But flat roof projects remind me of base housing. And I'd just like to hear your opinion as to why you did not propose that originally and why you changed it.
So we propose flat roof housing as a way to maintain consistency with the existing neighborhood. The R20 zone has a height limit of approximately 35 feet. The gable roofs that were shown on that plan, which should not have got submitted since it's not indicative of the current project, were approximately 10 feet higher than what was allowed per zoning. So we put on flat roofs to bring that building height down, to maintain consistency, and also to limit visual impacts. So abutters weren't staring at roofs kind of popping up above the tree line. Right. Yeah, and that was something that was, enjoyed by the select board, and we heard positive comments from them.
Just one other question came up. And I look at this, I know that 11 houses could be put in this space. I think your appraisal indicated that. And 3 approval not required could be put on Pleasant Street. I don't know if that's in addition to the 8 that are shown in your appraisal report. But, it's a big increase to go from 11, possibly 14, to 104. But in looking at your proposal, and very well prepared, I might add, in going through the pro forma, I just noticed that the purchase and sale agreement expired on 3/2. Has that been extended?
Yes.
I would assume it has.
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
so we're operating under an extension.
Right, we do have control of the property, that's correct.
And one other question that I had, and I think you answered it, on your pro forma, on line 152, you show $250,000 for a pump station for unusual site conditions. Now, I know you have a pump station for a force main to process the wastewater out to Pleasant Street, or eventually down to your connection. But what were the unusual site conditions that would prompt a $250,000, or was that the pump station that we're talking about?
Yes, that's correct. That was for the pump station.
That
We
was
just
for-
felt it was important to kind of separate that from the utilities cost line item, since
Okay.
it's, a separate item.
And I had a question. I couldn't find it in your proposal, but in perpetuity, and I see that the affordable units will be in perpetuity. The only other question that will come up is the sewer connection. That will be discussed in greater detail where you're connecting, because I note that the sewer commissioner, Paul Canoyer, has indicated that he really wants an analysis of that connecting area to ensure
And you've got that input from Paul, and
I do, and I can quickly address that. As soon as we received that input, I made contact with Paul as I normally would. Paul acknowledged that, as he normally would send it out to their consultants. CDM Smith has been the town sewer consultant for 30 or more years. They would put the flows from this project into their model and demonstrate that the pipe capacity from the project site to the sewer plant would be sufficient. Paul's instinct was that it would be, but he just wanted to, state that that'll happen. And we completely acknowledge it's something that we typically see.
excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Adams, you have something?
Now that houses have been brought up, what my question is, I hadn't seen the part that said 11 or whatever the count was. If you did small lots, 10, 12, 14,000 square feet like Elm Rock, 2 or 3 streets in there, and I realize the density would be pretty good for, pretty much for houses, but in my mind, there's places for apartments, and I don't know if this is the place for it. And there are places for Grafton. I mean, I know this is the first in a long line of apartment complexes that might come in front of ZBA, but and there's at least 2 or 3 of them that I'm okay with just thinking about it. And I haven't really watched the selectmen's meetings. I've went through that, done that. I don't watch them that much anymore. Sorry. If you did think about houses, the safe harbor, a lot of this would go away, I think. I realize something's got to happen to that land. I'm not saying it should always be a field and trees. And I realize housing is going to be what's there. My preference would be houses, even if it's small lots.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from the board? Okay. Mr. Hill, do you have anything to?
I always have questions. Just following up on Peter's comment, one of the things we normally, is this on by the way?
Yes, yes.
Is
You
it?
can hear me? Okay. One of the things that we usually hear from applicants in the first night is how close this development would be to things like shopping or amenities. Is this walkable to anything? Can you walk to a village center?
Where in town can you walk to anything yet?
Guys,
Excuse me, sir. Wait until you're recognized by the chair. That applies to everybody.
Can you walk to anything from the site? Is there any public transportation options that are near the site?
Let me pull up the, I know that the traffic study has these specific distances to public transportation. I want to say, yeah, it's included in the application under the traffic study.
I don't need a specific distance, I'm just asking, is it generally walkable to any amenities or public transportation?
I want to say it's within a few miles. Specific walkability, I couldn't comment on. It's not accessible by sidewalks, but.
As someone who's familiar with the area, I think the answer to the question is no.
Yeah, you're correct.
No.
Okay. On the parcel to the east, that's conservation land, right?
Correct.
And I just looked it up on Mass.js. There's a very large water body there. I don't know what that is. Can you describe, is that BVW, is that a pond? I noticed it's hydraulically connected to the river on the other side, but can you just describe what that feature is?
Sure. It's a pond. I can't say if it has a name, but on this colored plan here, you can see the pond. You see this, Dan, from where you
Yeah,
are?
yeah,
Okay, yep, so it's a fairly large pond,
Okay.
with a lot of beaver activity. So what I would like to, segue quickly into is that the open space as part of this development, perpetual protected open space in the solid green color provides connectivity to this existing open space at the end of Peters Way, this existing open space for land owned by the Grafton Land Trust, and this large tract of land of open space owned by the Commonwealth of Mass Department of Fisheries and Wildlife. So it actually is a significant benefit for this portion of the project proposal of this open space, the connectivity of open space, which will connect trails that actually exist today, and trails will be slightly expanded upon.
Okay, I mean, my question is more towards performance standards with respect to the wetland resource areas. So you're gonna be within 100 feet, the stormwater basin will be within 100 feet of the pond?
Yes, it will, yeah, we're
All right, so
prepared to file with conservation.
So this will require a notice of intent. I mean, the public may benefit from this as well, just so they understand that you're gonna need a permit from the Conservation Commission under the State Wetland Protection Act. This board has the ability to waive local bylaws. So the local wetland bylaw, if you've asked for waivers, the board will decide whether or not to grant those waivers. But the state law, you have to comply with.
Yes, that's correct.
And I notice there's a potential vernal pool on the site. You're pretty far, you're pretty much staying away from that though,
Yeah.
so there's no impacts to that.
That's right, correct, we're several hundred feet from the potential vernal pool. It's actually part of the proposed, open space.
Right. And the wetlands, so there's no wetlands on site, all the wetlands are off site?
Just a smidgen of the pond, comes a couple of feet onto the property.
And have you delineated that yet, and has that been approved by Concom?
It has been delineated, it has not been approved by Concom. It's very obvious though, because it's an edge of, a pond.
Okay.
It's not a, it's a wetland under the definition, but under DEP.
Yep.
But the delineation is straightforward. Yeah.
Okay. Are you planning on getting that approved by Concom before you file the NOI, or doing it at the same time?
We will do it as part of the NOI.
And what is your timing plan for that?
We are ready to submit. We were just kind of waiting some any input from tonight that we may perhaps want to incorporate into a filing. By any chance, something led to, minor change. But I think what we'll do based on so far the proceedings is, we will submit the plans as they exist with an 0710 to conservation.
Okay. And then you mentioned, or Clay, I think you mentioned that this project would allow the town to extend the safe harbor for a year, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
How many affordable units are there?
There will be 26.
Isn't our safe harbor 36?
So since these are rental housings, rental community, all of the total units would count towards your SHI.
Okay. All right, that's all I have, thanks.
Thank you.
Other questions from the board? So, before I open it up to the public, I just want to take a minute. I know many of you are new to the 40B process. I've actually been through, I think this is my 10th, having been a member of the Zoning Board of Appeals for over 20 years now. Mr. Adams also has got almost as much experience. So I just want to share some of our experiences and try and set the stage for how this is going to happen. What I always tell people with a 40B, and you're not going to want to hear this, but the approach we need to take is assume that this project is going to get built. Just assume that. I know you don't like it. Some of you may not like it. Assume it's going to get built. And this process is intended to do everything we can to mitigate any concerns you have. So it starts by hearing the concerns, right? And that's where we need input from the public to share your concerns with us. And then try to figure out ways to mitigate those concerns. And I'm going to give you an example because one's already been addressed through the LIB process, right? One of the neighbors, perhaps all the neighbors on Peters Way, complained or were concerned about the impact that visually that this development would have on their properties. And those concerns were mitigated by way of the berm that's up to 14 feet tall and the deciduous trees, the coniferous trees, et cetera. That's how the concern was mitigated, right? And those are things that we can do by way of putting conditions on the permit to address various concerns. Now, some concerns we're not gonna be able to do anything about, and that's almost by state law and by design. For example, somebody will tell us that this project will have an impact on the school systems. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But let's just say it does, and it means we have to go out and hire another teacher. As far as the Commonwealth is concerned, that problem is on Grafton to solve. The Commonwealth is gonna say, look, you don't have enough affordable housing. You're not carrying your share of affordable housing for the Commonwealth. You need to go out and hire another teacher. That's what you need to do to support this project. And that's it. It's just the fact that we need to hire another teacher, or we need to hire another fireman or DPW worker, or we need to go out and buy a fire truck, or whatever it may be. As far as the state's concerned, those are our problems to solve, okay? So it's not something that's gonna be, something that we can base a denial on, and I'm sure some of you out there would like us to deny this. So try and keep that in mind. And these aren't necessarily Bill McCusker or the ZBA saying it. That's how the law works. Chapter 40B is designed to build affordable housing. It's extremely unfair to the towns. I can tell you right now, it's extremely unfair. Our hands are very tied with respect to what we can do. It's just the way it is. Now, that's, I think, the bulk of the speech that I usually give. This whole thing gets clouded because of safe harbor. Okay, so what safe harbor may allow us to do, if in fact we're in safe harbor, and right now the Commonwealth says we are not, is it does allow us to deny a project, basically saying, we've got enough affordable housing, thank you very much, goodbye. It also allows us to put more stringent conditions on a permit that really can't be challenged to the state. We need to proceed tonight, at least for tonight, as if we are not in safe harbor, right? We need to just assume we are not in safe harbor and proceed. That's the most prudent thing to do. Anything else would be irresponsible. So try and keep that in mind as well. The safe harbor issue will resolve itself. And as I said at the beginning of tonight, this whole thing's not gonna end tonight. This is gonna go on for many meetings. So try and keep that in mind. And there was one part of my speech that I missed. There are 3 things that we can do, the ZBA can do with this permit. One is we can deny it outright. We have never done that. It's really ill-advised to deny it, especially if you're not in safe harbor. The second thing we can do is approve it as submitted. Never done that either. It's really probably not a good idea to just to give them what they want. The third thing is we can approve it with conditions. And that's where we get to control, that's the point that we get to control what's gonna happen here on this site. So what we've done in every case is we approve it with conditions. The conditions being the things to address concerns. So with that being said, I know I said something along the lines of opposition against speak, those 4, I don't care, just, yes you can, but 1 minute. When I invite people up, just raise your hand, I'll acknowledge you, come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and share with us what you want. The only other thing I'll say is a lot of people here, try not to get too repetitive. I'm sure some of you have a lot of the same concerns. Feel free to say, as was said before, I agree with such and such, but let's try and not get too repetitive on all the details. Mr. Adams.
Not to beat a dead horse, but Steve, can this be built on, could you put a cul-de-sac down in here?
Oh, you're gonna have to share the one mic, because now we're gonna go to public, so that mic's gonna have to go back and forth. Thanks.
Under what scenario? Like, if it's as open space?
No, I'm not even considering it open. I know the selectmen you talked to the selectmen about donating in it, but nothing's been donated yet, but you could.
An undeveloped piece of land could.
If you change this plan and build houses in there, could you put houses down, a cul-de-sac down there with a group of houses to add more houses?
Perhaps.
It's not like it's unbuildable. It's not unbuildable. It's not wet.
There's wetland, well, there is a wetland back there.
But it's just on the side.
There's a small wetland back there in the open.
You could probably skirt it.
I don't know. If you look at the existing
only reason I'm
conditions.
bringing this up is we have so much opposition with talking to safe harbor. Safe harbor is only good for a year or so. I know you guys, if we even invoke that, you'd be back. So it's just putting it off. I would rather have something that everybody could live with than just to put you guys off and us off for a year.
If you know, either on your own or at some point tonight, if you look at the existing conditions plan, you'll see the wetland back there, and I apologize if I misspoke about the wetland, Dan, you know, because I always actually kind of forget about that wetland because it's in the open space, but there is kind of a, where the potential vernal pool is, there's, you know, a pretty large depression, and the wetland on the adjoining property does come onto the open space property too, so if you look at the existing conditions plan, Peter, you'd see that it would be pretty tough
I mean,
to extend the road, a cul-de-sac road back there.
I've got to admit, I walked in there and went into the woods, then up the hill, and it didn't look bad to me.
Yeah, we're happy to discuss that with the appropriate, you know, plan on the screen.
And getting back to 1 second about the traffic report, if anybody wants to see what comes out of a 100-unit condo development, McGill has 5 buildings towards South Grafton on 122. It's 100 units, the yellow buildings. So, I'm not telling you to sit on the side of the road.
Okay, does anyone care to speak for or against? Ready to the microphone, name and address for the record, please.
Ann Tricatis, 39 Pleasant Street. I have a couple of questions. For the safe harbor, how many houses do we need to have in Grafton? Do we need to make, you know?
So there's 2 aspects of safe harbor. One would be if we just meet our 10%, and I'm sorry, I don't have those numbers committed to memory.
So like
And we're
if we
not
build
there.
36 houses, is that?
Then the second, the other way to get there is to meet a production plan, and I believe that is 36
Per year.
per year.
Per year. This
Yes.
project would have 104, so that would actually give us 2 years of safe harbor
Yeah,
if
so
we
we just need
approved
to
it.
build some houses.
Affordable houses, not just any houses.
Oh, affordable houses.
Yes.
Let me ask the question. When I bought on Pleasant Street 34 years ago, I thought it was zoned one-family zoning. I think if you wanted to get an in-law
You have to
apartment,
speak into the microphone.
I thought even if you had gotten an in-law apartment, you had to get that approved. I thought it was one-family zoning in that area.
Okay, so it's an excellent question, because perhaps I skipped over a very important aspect of 40B.
Yeah.
40B allows the developers to come and ask for waivers from the local bylaws, local conservation law, any of the local laws. So, what you just talked about was a local law, the zoning bylaw says Pleasant Street zone for whatever it is. They can ask for, and I'm sure when I look in the list of waivers that they've requested, they ask for a waiver from that particular zoning bylaw, and a whole bunch of others.
Yeah, that's why we bought.
Right.
The other question, the other thing is, I'm not an engineer. As my friends can tell you, I drove 5 kids to school back and forth for 12 years.
The mic.
12 years, and I can tell you what the traffic's gonna be. Because I have been on Pleasant Street going back and forth, crossing 122, middle school, elementary school. I don't need an engineer to tell me. It backs up. If you go to rush hour and you're trying to cross over, there's a lot of traffic. And you add 100 units with people, with kids, with cars, I mean, you're not gonna be able to get across.
So let me just say something about that. You just
Yeah.
said, I don't need an engineer to tell me.
Yeah,
But the reality is actually we do.
we do, but I'm
Okay,
just telling
so
you, as, I
we-
live on
what-
the road.
What we can't do is
Yeah.
deny it to the state and say, the
Yeah.
lady in blue at our open meeting said,
Yeah.
right? Or we can't say, everyone in town said. And I
No.
suspect that many, many people in town will
Yeah.
echo your statement, and quite frankly, I've seen it, I know.
Yeah.
So that's why there will be a traffic study. We will get the traffic study peer reviewed. And it's gonna be very important that the engineering and those studies come out and say that this is or this will be a problem.
It will be a
Okay.
problem.
That's gotta happen.
Yeah.
And for what it's worth, looking at the input from our chief of police,
Yeah,
he mentions sightlines. He doesn't mention the traffic being a problem. Okay,
You know, I
so
drive the road.
we need the professionals
Yeah,
to say something's a problem before we can do anything
Yeah.
with that
Yeah.
with respect to a potential denial and one of those.
okay.
So, yeah, I appreciate your input.
I have a
You do
couple
it.
more questions. I was very confused with
Ann,
the
you need to
rent.
speak.
I was very confused with the rent. So, if you want a single bedroom apartment, how much is the rent on that?
We'll just pull it up for you.
Because it's just, you know, I'm not a numbers person, I'm not that smart. I just want to understand what the savings is for these people buying these places. Not buying, renting. Do you do rent control, like after you renew,
That's
that they
numbers.
stay that way for 10 years, 15 years, or do you?
Perpetuity.
Then it goes up
No, it's not rent control.
Yeah.
They'll be affordable forever.
forever?
Yes,
Okay.
those are in perpetuity.
So
So
what,
these-
yeah.
So these rents,
Mhm.
you have the 50% AMI units. So we do not come up with the affordable rental rates.
Excuse me, that's too much numbers for me. If I wanted to rent a one bedroom, how much is it? Is that the 893?
So if
No.
you qualify for the lowest income level,
Okay,
it would be 893.
well, that's not really low, I don't think, for Grafton. How about three? So,
But
three bed-
if I may, he said the lowest income level.
Yeah.
That's maybe not correct.
Yeah.
If you make 50% of the average median income for Worcester County, I think it's actually southern Worcester County, so if you make 50% of what is made on average,
yeah.
then you would qualify for that $893
I don't
rent.
see that low for one bedroom.
But
I don't
these
know.
numbers are set by the state,
Mhm.
okay? You know, then there's the 60% of the average median income, and then a traditional 40B, all you get is this 80%.
Yeah,
All right, and that's, you know, a bunch of people qualify for
Yeah.
that, but there's a whole bunch of people who don't qualify
Yeah.
for that. And that's one of the reasons that the Select Board and the Affordable Housing Trust, you know, during the LIP process, got the developer to agree to provide some units that are even more affordable than these down here, which are the traditional.
yeah.
But so the Commonwealth's market rate, if somebody makes the average or more and they're, you know, make a good living, they're gonna pay the 2150 or the 2700.
Yeah.
And then the column to the left is the lower rent that would be paid by somebody who qualifies for the appropriate
Just don't see
affordable
that
housing.
low in me.
Did I
Let
ever
me-
speak in anyone?
No,
I have another quick question. You had said that this is gonna be affordable rent for the residents of Grafton. So that means only Grafton residents, like if my kids want to rent, they wanna move out from mom, or too much, you know, or is it, they're gonna come from God knows where? Is it for low income for Grafton residents?
So the project will have a request for local preference,
Uh-huh.
which sets aside 70% of the affordable units for people who live in Grafton, work in Grafton.
70%
70% of the affordable units,
of the affordable.
correct.
And how many of the 106 are affordable? How many of the 106 are affordable?
So 26 of the 104 total are affordable.
So why don't you just build 36 houses, and then we would do everything, and then, I mean, you're trying to get on that land for affordable housing, so you're kind of like tricking the government to say, hey, I'm building affordable houses, I'm getting 26, so you get low, and then the other 75, you could charge how much? How much are you gonna charge for the other apartments that are not low income?
That's the 2150.
Right.
So that really is like you're kind of rigging the system, in my mind, because in my mind, if I had a low income and I had kids and I wanted to bring them to school in this beautiful town of Grafton, I would like a little house. I wouldn't want to be in an apartment that you only have 26 for low income. That's really not very nice. I don't think you really care about the low income. Because 70% of the buildings are just, you're gonna make a profit off of. So, you know, you throw safe harbor and you throw always, and I want to help low income. I love to help people.
Thank
You know
you.
what I mean? Put a nice house, I love your idea, I think it would be perfect. I bought the house, it's zoning, one family. I don't have a problem, low income. Nice little capes, nice little ranches. Put your 36 in, boom, bam, done.
Thank you, we need to move on. Who else would like to speak?
Andy Jefferson, 31 Weston Street. If appropriate, I would like for Mr. Hill to explain why he feels we don't have to abide by the DHCD ruling about safe harbor.
So, it's kind of complicated, but it really starts with the project, the 40R project that's in North Grafton near the train station. And that project was approved by the planning board in 2021, but it wasn't approved in finality until March of 2022. And that's when DHCD, the state agency that oversees Chapter 40R and 40B, that's when DHCD said, all right, Town of Grafton, you've actually now completed this project. You now have certification for all these units. You're now eligible for the money that you get from the state for these units. And that's, at that point, DHCD certified the town safe harbor because we had more than 72 units, so we had a 2-year safe harbor from that project. So DHCD has said you need to have a building permit within a year of your effective date of safe harbor, or the effective date of the units that gave you the safe harbor. And so DHCD thinks that starting date for the 12-month period is the date of the planning board approval, which is July of 2021. But that's not actually correct. The correct date is March of 2022, March 7th of 2022, which is when this 40R process was completed. And so it's really just a question of interpretation of the regulations, and it's DHCD's own regulations. DHCD's regulations for the safe harbor, for housing production plan, states that the rules for counting units are those that are set forth under section 5603 of the regulations. And section 5603 says that units become eligible for the subsidized housing inventory upon the completion of the Chapter 40R plan approval process. So again, the completion date was March 7th, 2022, not the planning board approval in 2021. So what happened here is that building permits were issued actually in February of 2022. And those permits were within 12 months of that March, 2023. So that those building permits of February 2023 are within 12 months of the March 2022 date. They would not be within 12 months if you counted them back to July of 2021, right? That's more than 12 months. So it's just a matter of interpretation of the regulations, and DHCD, I don't think people are talking to each other within the agency, because the people who wrote the letter that came out today, I don't think are the same people that wrote the letter back in 2022 that said your date for counting these units was March 7th of 2022. And you have a letter from DHCD from March 7th, 2022 saying, this is the date on which these units are now part of your SHI. So DHCD can't say in one letter, your date is March 7th, 2022, and now say, no, the date is actually July whatever of 2021. It doesn't make sense. And so it's not logical. Now that being said, state agencies have a lot of power. There's a lot of deference to state agencies in the interpretation of their regulations. So that's why when Bill said this is uncertain, it is uncertain. But the board has the right under the 40B regulations to invoke the safe harbor. It's not the final word. DHCD will have the final word if there's an appeal from this decision tonight. And so the applicant can contest this. The applicant can ask DHCD for a determination. And I think once DHCD receives our submission, which we will submit, we'll submit all this evidence. We have the building permits from February of 2023. And we'll submit these to DHCD. And I think once they see this evidence, I think they're going to change their opinion. But even if they don't, then it is what it is. And then we're not in safe harbor unless the town wants to take the next level of appeal. The town has the right to appeal DHCD's determination to the next administrative level, which is the Housing Appeals Committee. And a lot of towns have done that. There's a lot of disputes over safe harbor, not just in Grafton. I've worked in a lot of towns where there's been questions of interpretation of the regs, and is the town really in safe harbor or is it not? So a lot of times these cases get resolved, and if there is an appeal, then this hearing is stayed until that appeal gets resolved, and so, which is good for everybody. So no one's wasting time with hearings until this question is resolved, because it is a very important question to get answered. Does that answer your question?
And I really don't want to go much further with the safe harbor discussion until it's really not relevant. Well, it's not true at all, it's very relevant, but it really doesn't apply to what we need to try and accomplish tonight. And we really need your input on this project itself tonight, and I'd like to try and stay focused on that. I'd also ask that we try to limit the discussion. There's a lot of you in the room, I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to talk tonight. So, try to be as concise as you can be with your comments. Who else would like to say something? Woman in the back, just raise your hand. Name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, I'm Catherine Pizzacani, and I live at 4 Christopher Drive. And I'd like to say that the development of 59 Pleasant Street is about more than the people who are in this room here tonight. This development is going to outlive all of us, and it will speak to what we valued at the time. And it's all going to become history, and I ask that we all think about what history we want for Grafton. And I think we want a town that is inclusive, thoughtfully developed, and cares about all of our residents, both the current and the future. We have significant concerns about this development. There's health, safety, and building site design concerns. The first is the excessive amount of units being proposed. 104 units, 207 parking spaces on, is it 6 acres, 4 acres, 8 acres of land? I don't know where we are now, but it's a lot. And how does this building meet the character of the neighborhood? The number of variances being sought is indicative of how this project does not fit into the look and feel of the neighborhood. It is supersized, the buildings are close together, one is 4 stories tall, they're extra long, they have flat roofs, which we've talked about. It doesn't fit into the character of the surrounding homes. They even asked for a lighted sign. There's nowhere around here we see lighted signs. Another example of it not fitting in. The traffic. This apartment complex creates additional traffic on already busy roads. It's adding 30% to the queue length on the Pleasant Street 122 intersection. Pleasant Street is a narrow road, and where this complex is, cars speed by. There's a narrow bridge, which you all have driven on probably, right? Located around the corner, which makes dangerous conditions for both pedestrians and drivers. And even in that diagram of their plan, it's like, where is a school bus even going to turn around in there? There's adding a minimum of 120 cars on this road, and that doesn't even include delivery trucks, UPS, landscaping, trash, etc. And also the short sidewalk that's being proposed, basically it's a meaningless sidewalk of a couple of 100 feet long connecting one road to the other. There's no other sidewalk anywhere over there, so it doesn't really benefit anybody. Excuse me?
Peters and Christopher both have sidewalks, so
Ma'am,
don't interrupt.
ma'am,
Yeah, I
please,
want to
wait,
speak, okay?
I don't need anyone, ma'am, address to the chair, please, and I'd ask everyone to withhold their comments until you're recognized by the chair.
Okay, thank you. So limited visitor parking is going to mean that overflow parking may occur on Pleasant Street, which is already way too narrow for the cars that drive on it now. There is protected land behind this development. All 3 parcels of land surrounding it are protected. 2 of the apartment buildings are within 100 feet of a body of water that is part of the Blackstone River watershed. This apartment complex has a significant risk of contaminated protected land with any wastewater runoff, trash, and other pollutants. There are 10 pages listing non-compliance of the project, and 8 of those pages are asking for waivers to wetlands protection bylaws. And even the open pond in the back of the property is a safety risk for children in the complex. And let me say clearly, because there's going around that people that are concerned about overdevelopment or NIMBYs or snobs or all of that stuff, I am not against affordable housing, and I believe that the majority of the people in this room are not against affordable housing. We are not against dense housing when it's situated in locations that make sense. What we are against is cramming 104 units, 207 parking spots on 6 acres, bordering ecologically sensitive land in a thickly settled, single-family residential neighborhood on a winding country road burdened with traffic problems, all under the false flag of affordability. Thank you.
Anybody else want to say anything? Go ahead, sir.
So when you come up to speak, can you please make sure that you are speaking into the microphone and make sure you're close, because it's going through the speakers and you're speaking to the front so the people in the back can't hear you. And it's not getting picked up on the recording. Thank you.
Thank you. Name and address, please.
John Morrow, 54 Pleasant Street. Can we go back to the overall lot?
Get a little bit closer to the microphone, please.
Good pickup, is it? The overall lot size, 12.51 acres. There's gonna be a quitclaim deed processed when this is done to give, I think it's, how many acres back to the town? 6.3 acres is what I calculated. Quitclaim deed says that the document in which a grantor disclaims all interest in a parcel of land. So that means they're gonna put Town of Grafton on that parcel. How can we use these densities if we're only gonna use 6.2 acres? It's kind of, my neighbor has 5 acres of land. Can I go over and ask him if I could deed 2 acres so I can expand my lot coverage over what's allowed and then deed it back to him? Seems like that's what we're doing here.
I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, it's still 104 units.
I understand, but the
Yeah.
densities then.
Whether it's X units per acre or Y units per acre, it's still that 104. They're asking for a waiver, the waiver will apply either way. I'm not so sure.
But it's not their land anymore. In other words, they're using, their bulk data is all based on 12.51 acres. Well, then they're gonna take and get rid of 6.3. In other words, our name isn't on it anymore. To me, that's kind of backing into the zoning now, and then all these densities double because they're taking half of the acreage that they're counting and using it. Okay, so again, that's something that I don't know how we clarify, but to me, it's either you use it all, if you give it away, you gotta reduce the density.
My point is, the units per acre doesn't come into play anywhere except wherever they're asking for a waiver from that requirement of our bylaw. They're asking for a waiver from that bylaw. They're not asking for X units per acre, they're asking for a waiver from our bylaw that says you're limited to Y units per acre, or whatever the bylaw may be. So nowhere is the actual number, other than on a feel-good presentation that's behind me, other than on, any, statements people are making, that really doesn't matter to these proceedings. What matters is the waiver that they are requesting, and the waiver isn't necessarily gonna look closely at the number as so much as it is just a waiver of the bylaw.
So technically, they're saying our density is 8.3 units per acre, but in reality, it's 16.77.
Okay.
Again, I don't know if Mr. Hill could answer the question, but I don't understand how that's legal in the fact that you have a parcel of land, we're gonna do the density because we're gonna use it all, and then we're gonna chop a piece of it off and give it to the town, another name on that land. But we can keep those densities.
I don't know if you want to add anything. Nowhere does the number really come into play. They're over what's allowed in the zoning district.
I think what's important to understand is that the zoning bylaw that regulates density doesn't apply.
Right.
So whether it's 8 units per acre or 16 units per acre, it doesn't matter.
I understand.
And so if it's better for them to say 16 units per acre and that's more accurate, then we'll take it at 16.
But what I'm saying is the numbers aren't true. Okay, to me, they're not true.
I think it's not true. I think you have an argument that it's.
Backhanded?
I understand your argument, and I think the board understands it, but the point is that whatever that number is, it doesn't matter because it's 40B. And so, but that being said.
It should.
Well, let me explain. So under 40B, the board weighs things. It weighs the need for affordable housing against the need to protect the health and safety of the future residents of the project, the health and safety of the residents of Grafton, the need to protect open spaces, and the need to modulate densities and protect land use patterns in the neighborhood and the town. So these are balancing interests. So the density is high, but there's a need for affordable housing. So this is, the point of the public hearing is for the board to hear testimony from everybody in the public, our experts, our traffic engineers, our civil engineers, so it can then deliberate and balance those things. So the density is one issue. Absolutely, it's an issue, and we've heard some discussion already tonight, and everyone's made some good comments. But ultimately, that's what the board is here to do, is to take testimony and to receive evidence over the course of the next few months. And when it feels it's received enough evidence, then it deliberates and it makes a decision, and it can put conditions on the decision. And that's why the safe harbor could be important, because if the safe harbor is in place, those conditions are more likely to stick than not to stick.
I understand that, but again, to me, it's, if we just look at the impervious surface, they're at 25, they're technically at 50. Again, I wanted to bring that up.
So I think my point is, we all see that.
I want to make sure it's
I think we all see that. They're playing games with numbers.
Oh, yeah?
I think we all realize that, and that was kind of my point, is it's dense, it's 104 units, it's dense, we know that.
Okay.
There's a lot of pavement, we know that. I mean, that's, yeah.
I have a few other items. The garages are new. When we were given the original presentation, there were no garages. Now, these are going to be rentals. You got, how much is a garage per month? 150?
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna use, you have 20 enclosed parking spaces. There's no guarantee they're gonna be rented. They shouldn't be in the count. That's my opinion. If they're not rented, I mean, if I have an affordable unit, I can't afford a garage, but maybe somebody who can afford $3,000 a month does. So maybe they'll use it for storage, not parking. Why should we count those? Again, my concern is the count isn't true if you have to pay to park. Okay, especially on 20 spaces. Can we see a picture of the building, please? We never saw that. Or at least you didn't want to show us.
While Clay's pulling it up, I just want to talk a little bit about the density. So the land that will be conveyed to the town will be open space in perpetuity. So the density is fair, because if the land was just carved off and it was sold to Jane Smith, and Jane Smith was going to develop it someday, and the density would change, but it's not going to change. That land is a parcel of land today, 12.51 acres. It'll always be 12.51 acres, whether half or 40% is owned by the town of Grafton or owned by the developer. The density is considered, for the parcel as it is today. It'll never be developed, what I'm saying is, so the density is true. There's no numbers games. Every project I worked on, I talk about density in the situation. Especially today, there's a component of open space on almost every project, even conventional subdivisions. So the density is not a numbers game. I know your point, and I know what you're saying. You're trying to make it sound like we're being disingenuous, but we're not. The density is based on land that'll be in open space in perpetuity.
But not under your name. See, that's the thing.
It doesn't change the fact that it will be in open space in perpetuity.
Yeah, I want to move on from
right,
the density per acre, because Steve, does the number show up anywhere, in any waiver, in anywhere? Do you actually say you're requesting anything specific like that?
I believe so, yeah.
Well, you're requesting a waiver because you need more density than is allowed under the bylaw.
Correct, because, the bylaws are 20.
Right, so it doesn't matter what the number is, you're still going to request the same
Requesting a
waiver.
waiver regardless. Your point is true today.
Okay. Looking at the buildings are over 35 feet in multiple areas. They're not all under 35 feet. Where are you going to put the heat pumps for the units? On the roof?
That's something that will be determined at a later stage. They're probably not going to get placed on the roof. Chances are they'll be placed kind of along the ground, along the sides of the building.
Is that facing Pleasant Street, so we'll get to see all those?
Yeah, they'll be behind the landscape berm.
Can you go to the floor plans, please?
Sure. This is for a 1- and 2-bedroom building.
You can see at the top unit, there's 3 heat pumps that are half in the wall and half outside the wall. would they go in front of the windows on the ground floor units?
No, they're located away from those per the building code.
Okay, the other thing I wanted to bring up, again, the buildings have, everybody saw them, there's no character of the neighborhood other than 35 feet. I'd rather see pitched roofs if I had to. Now, these units don't have common lobbies. This is a motor lodge is what it is. How long are the alleyways between the 4 units in each hallway?
So you're talking about the access way here,
Yep,
correct?
yep.
Yeah, it'd be the depth of 2 units, I think.
50 feet?
Yeah, maybe a little 60, yeah,
And they're,
probably 60
they're
feet.
open to the weather.
So they're partially enclosed.
Where are they enclosed? The roof, or the floor above or below?
And the sides.
Right, the sides. So we have these lattices that are placed in, so they're open air, but they're primarily protected from the elements.
That's where the non-smoking smokers will smoke, right? This says that the property's non-smoking. I see people hanging out in alleys. But again, I'm just looking at a few things real quick. On one of the plans, there's a bank of gas meters. Did you notice that?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not doing gas.
All these plans will be done. Mr. Berger in town,
I understand.
he is the utmost building inspector that is very thorough.
I understand. I'm
With
an
a full
architect. I work with them every week.
Excellent. So these plans aren't ready to be submitted to, Mr. Berger for a complete set, but these have been built elsewhere, and they'll be similar too. That's all I can have to say.
These are conceptual plans that we're seeing right now.
I understand. I just wanted to bring up some points now that I know we'll get back to them. We'll get into more detail. Okay? But those are my questions right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to the yellow shirt.
Sorry about that. Karen Swanson, 19 Christopher Drive. I'm just a little concerned about traffic coming from Millbury Street being used as a shortcut to get down to Pleasant Street, because a lot of kids in our neighborhood, Blanchard, Danielle, Laura, Christopher, a lot of people, a lot of kids, and you already can tell who doesn't belong in the neighborhood per se, because they're speeding through. It's very rare, but I think that's gonna be a racetrack at this point. Is there anything that can be put up on the side of, say, Millbury Street, not a throughway, something like that? I don't know if that's possible, but I think people are gonna go pretty darn fast as a shortcut to get there.
So you're concerned about going through Christopher?
Yeah, I live on Christopher, but in order to get from Millbury to Pleasant, you've got 3 other streets.
Yeah.
And a lot of children.
Yeah, I think that's a question for the police and the safety board or whatever it's called. But I have made a note of it here. And also just reiterate that there will be a meeting that will focus on traffic and traffic concerns and things like this as well. So it is something that could be brought up and discussed with our peer review and their traffic engineer.
And the other thing is, coming down Christopher, we obviously turn on Pleasant Street. Very narrow street. How are they even going to make the turn without going into oncoming traffic on Pleasant from that development? I don't know how they're gonna do it.
I think it'd be the same way you make it coming out of Christopher. I mean, it's just, it'd be the
Well,
same way.
but you're gonna have a lot more cars coming. We can at least, sit there and wait, but now you've got 200 and something cars who might not be as patient as the people like in that development who have been there and know that street's a dangerous street.
Understood.
And then the bridge. I feel like that traffic will be held up from 122 back, just like this other woman said. Is that bridge, I don't know, coated strong enough to hold standing traffic? Because I feel like there are gonna be cars now on that bridge.
All excellent questions for the traffic engineers.
Okay. And the other woman talked about 10 pages of nonconformance. Are those, and I don't know what they are, but are those going to be made public?
Everything
Like
is on the
this?
website. Everything
Okay.
is on the website, on the application page.
Okay.
And I
So,
think,
So everything that's been presented, every application, oh, I need the mic.
Speaking to the mic.
Sorry. So everything that's been presented, every comment that's been submitted from the town and from every abutter is on the webpage. And it's just a link and you click on it, so everything is there. And I just uploaded the presentation Clay just did tonight.
Okay. And
Just to follow up on that, I believe what the woman was referring to is their requested waivers. That's kind of like the meat of what the 40B does, they get waivers from local bylaws. And there'll be a meeting where we're gonna go through each and every one of them and discuss it in painful detail.
Okay.
So there'll be a lot more talk about each of those waivers.
Okay. And then our house values, I saw somewhere on the presentation that house values will increase. I don't know how that could happen. I mean, we pay a lot of money to live in our neighborhood, and they're wonderful houses, wonderful neighbors, wonderful area. How are they going to increase? I can only feel like they would decrease.
Either way, it's gonna be irrelevant, with respect to, how the state's gonna look at any decision we make.
But don't we have the option, isn't this the forum to say, hey, yay or nay, we don't want the rest of the houses to decrease, so we might do something different here?
And unfortunately, we don't. I mean, we can say yay or nay, but then the state, by way of the Housing Appeals Committee, is gonna, well, I assume they would appeal if we were to say nay, and the Housing Appeals Committee is not gonna look favorably upon housing values as being a concern and a reason to deny. This, again, it's not me saying it, I'm just telling you how the Housing Appeals Committee is.
And then just one other question. Do we not already have enough of this type of housing in town to fall under that level of safe harbor?
No, we don't.
We don't.
Well, no, we may have generated enough in the last year to give us a break, okay? That's what's up for debate. But even if that's true, in March of 2024, that safe harbor would end, and we need to start generating more. So, no, I think the short answer is no, we don't.
Yeah, the town's around 5%, and we need to be at 10%. We need around 700 units, we have around 35 to 350, somewhere around there. So we need a lot more affordable housing to get to the permanent benchmark. And so that's why I think some may view this project as a good thing, because it creates a lot of affordable units that would give the town a 2-year safe harbor. So that's something, again, that's in the balance. It's not determined.
But is it our goal to, do we have to be in that safe harbor? Like, can't we just be where we are today and not be?
Great, very good question, I'm sorry we didn't address this. So if we're not in a safe harbor and a really bad 40B project comes around, then we don't have the ability to say no to that bad 40B project.
That's it.
And also, there's 5 new market rate housing developments going on in town. So every time you build new market rate numbers, your affordables drop, because you're not adding affordables to those new market rate developments. So it's always a game of catch up. So you're trying to catch up to your numbers, like you might be at 6%, you may be at 7%, so now we've added 150 new market rate units, so now your affordable percentage is gonna drop. So it's always a game of catch up, and that's, it's just Grafton, it's growing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sir, right here in the front.
Bill Nicholson, 33 North Street. So are there any other 40B projects currently proposed in town?
So there's none in front of this board right now?
So, and I realize the state kind of forces our hand on this. Could we stipulate, or you, the ZBA, stipulate that, Mr. Williams said there'll be 26 units, it'll be affordable? Why can't we just say we need 50%?
So, well, actually, I think, Dan, we can't just arbitrarily say that, right?
We can't require the developer to provide more affordable units than what they're proposing.
But even if we could, then there's the economics of the whole thing, right?
Well, it would make it less palatable for them, they wouldn't make as much money.
Well, I think they would be able to very quickly show that it makes it uneconomic and not buildable, okay? And I'll just say this, because we went through this on Prentice Street. the way the state looks at the economics of these projects, Prentice Street, which did get built, actually was viewed as not buildable by the state. My point is, it doesn't take much to get to a point where they'll just go to the state and say, what they're trying to make me do is uneconomic and I can't build this. And the state will overturn whatever conditions, whatever it is that we've done. So it's the economics.
Just one thing on the safe harbor and the affordable units, because there's 26 affordable units in this development, and the rentals, all 104 units count towards that affordable, so they all count as affordable units, even though there's only 26.
And I mean, we all know, and I'm sure you all know, this is a totally inappropriate place for this. I mean, you know, Pleasant Street is basically a country road, and you're gonna have, I mean, it's totally inappropriate. I mean, I'm sure everyone in this room agrees with that. I'm just wondering, I guess another question is, when will we know whether, what the state decides, whether we're in safe harbor or not? Do you have any idea when we'll find out about that?
So it depends whether the applicant challenges the safe harbor invocation that was made tonight. And if the applicant challenges that, then this DHCD will issue a ruling. And that could take, a month or two.
I'm just wondering, maybe it would give you more time if we don't have to meet that safe harbor goal until 24. And if it turns out we're already in compliance, at least temporarily, then you could shoot this down. Because there'll be other projects that'll be proposed by developers, in a better location, like down by the T station, that's a more appropriate spot. You're right on a state highway, and this is a country road. This is totally inappropriate, and I'm sure you've all considered this, but like Mr. Adams says, this is not the place for this. But anyway, thank you.
It's a conversation that could be had. Other comments? So with that.
Scott Novitsky, 49 Pleasant. I put my public comments in, so I'm not going to regurgitate those same things. I'm going to try and abide by the rules and assume this goes through. So just really quick on the traffic study, I don't want to go on that, but I know they're saying they're going to do another one, and not just Christopher, but I think the current study was just at the ends. And even right before the ends, there's a bunch of cut-throughs. Pullard, Elmwood, maybe going to the, yeah, so Hudson's another one. So it would be nice if they're really going to do this, definitely consider all of those cut-throughs, because I live on Pleasant every time I go to Millbury, which is often. I never touch those endpoints, and I avoid them at all costs. And I'm going to avoid them more now. On the image there, assuming this is going to go through, abiding by the rules, on the north side, I live right through that little short, what looks like forest, but is not. And so I would like to see some additional trees there to avoid with the headlights. The north side, right near that garage thing that is also new. Yep, right through there. That is, there's no coverage in the winter. So that would be my concern there for you all. Community outreach, you guys talked a little bit about that. The community speaking. Would you consider single-family homes? It would make this process a lot quicker and a lot easier for a lot of us here.
I understand everybody really doesn't want, change and something in their backyard. I get it.
Please, let him speak.
We started this process, like I said, back in 2021, so it was in December. There's many families out there in Grafton that currently can't afford anything right now. So if the woman was talking about her daughter, I don't know the circumstances, but maybe she's just getting out of college and she'd like to actually live near her mom. But, I can't afford a market rate unit. But she could apply through this program and live right down the street because she can afford the 50% AMI. So she's out of school, she has a good job, but she only makes a certain amount of money, but she can rent the place for, I'm just throwing a number, $900 instead of $1,800 a month.
But that can't be done by single-family homes?
That's correct, yeah. Yeah, feasibility.
Aren't there options for single-family homes to still be affordable? Right, didn't you just show a 40B single-family home community that you left us at the end of that presentation? That looked beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's all, and that's another development for home ownership program. That's
Okay,
exactly-
and also home ownership,
We're
right?
not-
And
we're
so.
not, we're not doing that at this particular site.
Okay, but that is that something you guys would explore for this opportunity?
Not for this
wasn't like
particular
this.
site, because we would have done that 15 months ago.
Okay, but you did talk about community and you want to hear, so we're here to say that's what we want.
We had 7, like I
Okay.
said before, we had 7 selectmen meetings and 3 community outreach meetings.
The select board meetings, with all due respect, we were very limited on public comment.
Okay.
So, I got shut down a couple of times from speaking, and it was, just to be fair, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we're now given, unfortunately, the zoning board is the one who is sort of funneled all of these for which our first vocal, real chance to come out and speak in public to say. So that's why we're all here. So, I'm sorry that's a tough process for you. It is, it sounds
Absolutely,
tough,
I love
and I
it when
agree
you
your
come out, and
frustration.
that's why we
and-
had the 3
and-
meetings.
And that's why
with
we're
you
here,
guys.
so in the community outreach, I'd like you to consider what everyone is gonna probably come and speak more things about that.
Absolutely,
So,
I'm happy to
thank you.
answer any questions that you
Yeah, I
have.
appreciate it.
I just want to say something about, managing home ownership and affordability. Like I said, I've been through a bunch of these, and almost all of them have been home ownership developments. I think Prentice Place is the only one that was a rental development. Okay, I gotta get other people who want to try and get through this tonight.
My daughter up, my daughter wouldn't move there.
Okay, thank you. No, please, ma'am, please.
Well, he
In the
shouldn't
back.
use my daughter as an example for something I don't want, okay? That looks like a prison, my daughter
Ma'am,
could
if you don't
rent
stop
for
talking, I'm gonna ask you to
$1,000
leave.
for 3 bedrooms in Grafton, and it'd be a beautiful home. Okay, so don't use my daughter,
I apologize.
yes.
Hello. My name is Sarah McGrath, 4 Peters Way, so I'm a Peter Way resident. I don't know if there's any other ones in here. Oh, yeah. So I think my biggest concern, I mean, obviously, as we all said, we're all for affordable housing. It's just the right location and what you're building on this lot. But my biggest concern is safety. I have 2 children. I have a daughter who is a 7th grader at Grafton Middle School this year. In the fall, she went to take the bus. The bus doesn't come down Peters Way because the bus can't make the turn to take a right out of Peters Way. Okay, because the road is not wide enough. So question 1 is, are we widening Pleasant Street? Are we widening it? No. So I have an SUV. When I'm driving down Peters Way to take a right, the way the curve is, I have to wait if there's oncoming traffic coming the other way. I have to wait till the car goes by to be able to take a right. So that's just this development. I can't imagine what that's gonna cost with 104 units, 200 plus cars, plus the vicinity of that to Christopher Drive, plus Peters Way, and you have all different series of cars turning out of all different intersections. It's gonna create a safety nightmare. My daughter cannot take the bus anymore because she has to cross the street, Pleasant Street, at 6:40 a.m. in the dark, and she's almost been hit by a car numerous times. So that's without adding 200 plus more cars during rush hour, in the morning. This is just cars already on traffic pattern. So my biggest concern is safety. There's a Pleasant Street resident here. I have another elementary school kid. We've stood at the bus stop. We've watched deer in broad daylight get hit by a car on Pleasant Street. It's a racetrack. So at the end of the day, my biggest concern is safety, and a lot of that has to do with traffic flow. But on top of that, the sidewalk is another concern. I don't necessarily want Peters Way connected to this development, because I don't know if there's a recreation facility here, but that entices kids to drive their bike, ride their bike, come down, and now we have this other flow of people walking or in a private neighborhood where 60% of the residents on Peters Way have swimming pools, and you add other safety concerns. Are kids going to be riding their bikes down Peters Way now? Are they going to be going in someone's backyard who might have a swimming pool? So there's a lot of other safety concerns that we have here that I would like, respectfully ask that you take into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? In the back? I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Fox, 61 Sunrise Ave. So, I guess just going by the property, if we're assuming that we...
Ma'am, you gotta speak into it.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So assuming that we don't need the safe harbor anymore. Building number 4 in the project looks like it's well within the 100-foot buffer of the wetlands, not on that slide in particular, but that building on some other imaging there does appear that way, so I just want, to
So we,
make everyone aware.
our town engineer or peer review will look into all those things, and they're saying it's not. If it is,
Okay.
that'll get picked up.
Okay.
We said it was.
Within 100 foot?
Yeah.
The building's within 100 foot?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
not the 25, but
Okay, oh yeah, you're right, you did say that.
Also, just another environmental concern, I won't get into it, but I know Catherine already mentioned that 8 of the 10 pages of waivers have to do with, the wetland protection, so that's a bit concerning. Let's see, the traffic and accidents, I won't really harp on that too much, but I did print out a map of, it's a 2022 crash map. And if you look at Pleasant Street compared to many other of the side streets, there's already a significant amount of accidents. I can certainly hand this to you.
Yeah, did that get submitted?
Did it get submitted? I
Okay,
don't.
'cause I remember seeing that.
Yeah, all I could do was kind of copy and paste. I wasn't able to upload any images to, so, is it allowed, am I allowed to
Absolutely.
show to? All right. And then I just have a question, I guess more for Eastland. I know that, in going to the select board meetings, you had presented the project similar to this one on Upton Road, Upton Street. That one was unanimously voted on by the select board. This one only had 3 yes votes. And this one was, Upton Road, Upton Street was voted on first. I'm wondering why you guys decided to pick this one to start off with.
This particular site, actually, we spent the most amount of time with all the abutters and talking about it, technically review. We shifted units, shifted buildings, created open space, tried to solve the problems of the abutters on Peters Way, of drainage concerns. We allotted to doing speed signs out on Pleasant Street to do traffic. So extensive amount of detail and time was spent on this particular one and not Upton Street.
Okay.
I appreciate the question.
And then I guess, originally when we first were going to meet for the project, we, I guess, thought that we were in Safe Harbor. So I had made more of a detailed environmental kind of concerns packet. I had made copies for everybody here at the board, but I didn't bring them all tonight because I assumed that we were out of Safe Harbor. I also would just like to give this to you guys to review in case we do have Safe Harbor.
So you can present those to our secretary, she can make copies for everyone, or.
Thank you, everyone.
That's great. Thank you for your input.
Thank you.
Was there somebody over here who wanted to say something?
Was the crash map part of what you?
Yep,
Okay,
yep.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ma'am, in the red? We'll get you next, sir.
Hi, Gail Schoberg, 56 Pleasant Street, so we're directly across. So we'll be having traffic lights from the cars in our front windows all the time. We'd like that berm to be high enough so that that doesn't happen. I have a question that one of the waivers has to do with all the sewer connection fees, waiver of all the sewer connection fees. And I don't know, whether, can somebody explain why we would do that? What's the benefit? It's
memorandum number 4?
Sure, it's a little confusing. Actually, there's sewer connection fees per unit per what we're proposing is, if we paid all the sewer connection fees, okay, for the building, it goes to the town, okay? They're saying the town would like, if they choose to decide to, instead of paying, I'm just throwing out a number, instead of $500,000 to the sewer company to go towards that, we would do $250, and then the balance of the $250 would go into the general fund of the town. So we're not saving anything, it's wherever the town would like to spend the money, we're aimable for that, so, if that makes any sense.
Aren't the sewer fees generated to cover the sewer expenses? So when the sewer department need those funds?
That's correct, yeah, yep.
Okay.
So, maybe I can put a select board member, or maybe a town administrator on alert here and kind of address why, because this was part of the lit process, right? This is not something that's normal, so why are the sewer fees being handled that way? Anybody care?
It's connection fees, I think.
It's connection fees.
I think it's connection fees and not monthly sewer fees.
Right, yeah, it's a connection fees, right.
Which is fine.
So, the other type Katrina here, get right up in it. So this is something that went before the Board of Sewer Commissioners, and it's not atypical for them to issue a reduced cost for the connection fees. So on a smaller project, the connection fees cover the amount of time that they have to put into it. When you get the economy of scale, it then starts to get lopsided, and you'll see this on some other projects that will come before you too. So that's pretty straightforward, I think.
So,
Terry Bradley, 21 Pleasant Street. Hi, guys. I was just wondering about the safe harbor thing. If we don't qualify for the safe harbor, if they say we're not in it, does that mean that this committee cannot deny a permit to build?
well, we could deny it, it probably would not stand up. at
What would
the
happen
appeals
in that
committee.
case? If, in the case that you would deny a permit to build, what would happen after that?
They would more than likely appeal it
Right.
to a place called the Housing Appeals Committee.
Yeah.
The more recent times that's happened has actually been a mediation session where the dispute was kind of resolved in mediation, but if not, it would go to the Housing Appeals Committee, and that's a group of folks who sit in Boston and probably know nothing of Grafton, and they would make a decision, and their ruling's generally gonna come down very heavily in favor of the developer because we're not, because we don't have 10% affordable. That being said,
Yes.
you know, there are circumstances where, you know, projects can be denied, public safety may be one of those issues, so, but generally speaking, it's very hard to deny a project. And like I said, the Housing Appeals Committee is gonna rule, generally come down in favor of the developer and building affordable housing. The law is slanted in that direction, et cetera, et cetera. That's why I said historically, and the general recommendation is, you don't necessarily wanna deny it, you wanna basically put conditions on it to address whatever the concerns are that you have.
This committee does have the capacity to deny the permit, Bill, right?
We do.
Okay. So I just wanted to clear that up. What would you have to hear to deny that?
You know, it would have to be some very compelling, you know, public safety is the one that keeps coming to mind, and what are maybe some other ones that would.
There's probably been 500 cases in front of the Housing Appeals Committee where boards have denied permits since 1969 when the statute was adopted. You can probably count the number of times on your hands where the Housing Appeals Committee has affirmed a denial. In those cases are dire public safety, public health concerns that cannot be mitigated, that outweigh the need for housing. And they generally are public safety, and they generally concern traffic safety, like long dead-end roads that are serpentine, that go up a hill but with 20% grades. You know, that's 1,000 or 2,000 feet long, that kind of scenario. There was a project on the Cape that was at the end of a runway of a commercial airport. That was deemed to be beyond the pale. Yeah, so it's really gonna be beyond the pale. I think that's probably the best way to describe it.
Would aquifer, endangering natural aquifer fall into that?
It would if it was not mitigatable, right? So if there was some pollution, and this project is not gonna be that project. This project's hooked up to sewer, and so there's not gonna be a pollution source from a project like this that would damage the aquifer. I know you're in a zone 2, and that's something that'll be considered by this board. You're in a zone 2, you're in the town's aquifer protection district. So that's something the board will think about. Are there any pollution sources? Are there some conditions maybe that we can impose to reduce any threat of impact on the town's aquifer?
One of my main concerns, yeah. I think you said in your presentation that, I don't understand this, so you said that the project is in the water supply overlay district? What does that mean?
It just, there's an overlay, there's a district, there's an area in town, multiple areas in town, that have been designated as part of the water supply protection district, overlay district.
Is that because?
And that just means there are some additional local bylaws that apply to that area.
Is that because they rest over a natural aquifer?
It's protecting our water supply, Grafton Water District and South Grafton Water Supply.
I just want you guys to consider, besides all the traffic things, my wife and I are against this project, obviously. I mean, it's just, we don't feel that it is in the fabric of our neighborhood. It's just, it will change the character of our neighborhood forever. And I've lived here for 20 years, or over 20 years. My wife's lived here a little longer. And, we witnessed the growth that's happened in town, and we understand that some of it is necessary. But I've lived in 4 towns that had a pro-growth, policy, and controlled growth is what they call it. They like to control it, as if it was something that could be controlled, And so what happens is, in these 4 towns that I've lived in, is that the growth starts to eat away at the fabric of the community, little by little, year after year, because the town keeps, needing to have more growth, more increase in tax base to fund services. And the services start to grow because the population starts to grow, so you need more teachers and more police and more fire. I think we just hired more police last year, right? So our services are starting to grow, crime rates will start to go up. These are the fears that we have, right? That things will get out of hand, that we will become another urban center, right? Right now, Grafton is suburban. It's not urban yet. And I'd like to keep it suburban. I'd like to maintain that feel of that, because I think that's appropriate for that neighborhood. I don't think that raising it to a level of urbanization would be helpful to the people that live in that area, and myself included. Just another point before I go, that Grafton, when I moved here 21 years ago, or whatever it was, I did research on the town. I love the history of the town. Before Grafton was Grafton, it was Hassanamisset, right? Praying Indian village. And before Hassanamisset, a lot of the indigenous people lived between the Quinsigamond River and the Blackstone. And so that was a major habitation for indigenous people, north and south. And we still have the reservation up on Brigham Hill. So since that field hasn't been really under any kind of building, I mean, it's just been agricultural for a long time, there is the chance that there may be some archaeological human remains or burial remains unearthed. And I just want everyone to know that, I'm sure you all know this, but I just want to say this, that if that happens, the state has to be called in. There has to be an examination for archaeological reasons too, right? So I just want everybody to be cautious about that, considering the history of our town. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. So we just want to, thank you for comments. I just want to address, you talked about the denial and what about a aquifer, things like that. I can share with you that the first 40B I was involved with, which was down on Adams Road. It's a development called High Point Estates, which still isn't complete 20 years later. We actually lowered the density. We put a condition on that that effectively lowered the density. And one of the reasons we cited for that was the fact that that development's in what was designated by the state as an area of critical environmental concern. It's designated as the headwaters of the Nisco Brook watershed. The state came in and said that is an area of critical environmental concern. And based on that, we felt, well, that may be a reason that we really ought to try and lower the density here. We tried to lower from 76 to, I think, 52 or 50, or I don't know how many houses. The Housing Appeals Committee overturned that. Okay, so the Housing Appeals Committee overturned, or basically overturned that condition. So, you know, these things may seem very obvious and right in plain sight, but in the eyes of the Housing Appeals Committee, you don't have enough affordable housing, Grafton, so, you know, and that's the reality of it, unfortunately. Did I see someone else's hand up? Sir, right here in the center. Was there somebody raise their hand in the back? Sir, standing up, you'll be next.
My name is, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
My name is Tom Knapp, I live on 1 Pleasant Street. All I want to do is reiterate what everybody else is saying. This traffic is absolutely crazy. It's a dangerous road right now. I have a dog, I put an orange vest on to walk it. Even to cut across on Hudson, which is used as a cut across street by so many people. I see it, I have to avoid my walking. I go to the power line or somewhere. You're going to put in, there's 185 houses on Pleasant Street in a 3-mile lane. You're going to put 104 in 1/8 of a mile. That's 1/3 of what's there already. It's crazy. You're going to put 200 more cars on that road every day. Those apartments, there's going to be people moving in and out all the time, forever. In perpetuity, it's not permanent housing. You know, people who buy a house, they stay there. They care about the property. They care about the town. Apartments, people come and people go. And walking distance from there for anybody who lives in an apartment is non-existent. You can't get to a shopping center. You can't get to town by walking, especially on Pleasant Street, without getting hit by a car. It's crazy. To put apartments in there, and the way they look, those long buildings, to me, they look like projects, for Christ's sake. It's disgusting. They're all single-family homes, and I can't see anyone putting those in there. It's going to destroy, it's a country road that's overused already, and you're going to put ugly apartments in there for transients. I think it's disgusting. So I'm dead set against it.
Thank you.
Sorry, I've been standing all the time. Hi, I'm Ken Swadrak, 52 Sunrise Ave. My question is, we keep talking about the public safety and this study that's being done, and the state's coming in to help to look at the traffic. Is that a correct statement? Or is that going to be done by a private company?
No. So the applicant will do a traffic study. That's part of what he has to submit to us. He has already submitted one, he's doing another one. We will have our peer review, our town engineers or somebody we hire to benefit the ZBA, review what their engineers have done. It's called a peer review.
Right.
So that'll be done, and then we'll have another meeting.
So they're just going to review it. They're not going to do their own parallel study with that, right? So we could look at X and Y because
they may come back and say, right, no, this isn't complete enough, we need to get traffic counts here, or, you know, we don't, so, you know, they are not gonna go out and count traffic, at least not initially, but they may recommend additional studies or additional counts or additional whatevers.
Right, what would it take to have this group of people here who have true safety concerns about Pleasant Street to be able to go to these experts and give our input, just like we're giving to you, because that's where it's all at. right? Bottom line is, if this isn't safe, they can't build it there.
I think that input will, when we have a meeting that talks about traffic, I would encourage you to come and share that information with our peer review and get his feedback on
But can we talk to their guy, right? Can we have their people come in here, come to the library X number of days, and we all come back and we say, look, my child's out in the street, I saw a baby out in the street, we can't walk, the streets,
Go ahead.
the streets
Our
are
traffic
bad.
engineer will be at the same meeting, your peer review engineer will be at.
No,
I think he's asking to
we
talk
want a
to him before.
separate, we want a separate meeting for now. Why not?
Because it's not procedurally acceptable, in my opinion. I mean, the data that our traffic engineer will provide is open book, it's available.
But the data is like, we want to help him provide his data, like, these are the time of days you should be looking at. These are the times of the year you should be looking at. You should be looking during school year, not in July, right? When there's nobody.
He's already
in school.
said they're doing the traffic study again, so that's now, which is school year.
Right, but again, we don't have any input into that traffic study, like historical accidents that are on that road. Look what happened when the bridge went out down in South Grafton. We were out for years. We couldn't go down there. That stone bridge, the same thing's gonna happen to it. You can't get a truck and a car by there. We have to be able to communicate this to the traffic people.
Excuse me a second. Dan, would it be appropriate for us to have a meeting with our peer review before he looks at it, to listen to these complaints, so that when our peer review is looking at their study, he's got all that input ahead of time?
You can, sure.
So maybe we do that?
Yeah,
So,
it's more appropriate to communicate this with our peer reviewer, not with their engineer.
Okay, we just need
But
to
there is a
communicate
process
it.
for that.
Right, we just need to communicate it in an open forum.
Right.
So that we can all show up here again like this. Everybody's been very respectful, and I think all of the comments have been about safety, not that we don't like the project per se. 99% of it's been about safety on that road. I mean, I've lived in this town for 70 years. Pleasant Street has not changed in 70 years, right?
No,
And we really have to look at the safety of this thing. Because as Mr. Adams said, up on Providence Road where McGill built, that's a major highway up there. It's easy to get on and easy to get up. It's not a country road.
so, first of all, I think everyone on the board is hearing the traffic issues loud and clear.
I just don't
And
want that.
I kind of like the idea of giving an opportunity for you folks to provide input to our peer review beforehand. So, I think we can arrange that. I think that's something we can try to make happen.
Yeah, and of course, if you have any other questions that you would like, answered in advance, if you want to do it in person, just write them all down and you could submit them to Katrina and we'll respond appropriately.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks in here would have really great ideas on how to do a traffic study here. Right? They would. They really would. I mean, like in the old days, remember when the cars used to run over the thing and it would like.
But it is important to remember what I said though, and that's that, the Housing Appeals Committee, if this ends up in an appeal, is not gonna,
But all I'm saying, but if it's.
So we gotta give
truly
the input
public
to the
safety-
engineers.
But if it's truly public safety, that you can fight, right?
So it needs to come through the engineering, it needs to be through best practices, through the engineers, through the professionals. And that's what you're asking for, and I think that's what we can make sure.
Right, but I don't think we should lose that of the history and
I don't think we're going to.
the anecdotal things that
I
are
don't think
happening
we're
on
going
that
to.
street today.
I don't think we're going to, and I agree, I don't want any of that information lost.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bill, if I could just
Yeah.
elaborate a little bit on that issue. Sir, I know you're concerned about the traffic study being complete and looking at all the issues. There's actually state guidelines. The Mass DOT issues a book like this thick that tells engineers around the state how to do traffic studies. It's actually a guideline that says this is how you need to do traffic studies if you're gonna work with Mass DOT. So let me finish.
Yeah.
So their engineer should be producing a traffic study that meets all the requirements in the state's guidelines, which requires things like intersection capacity analysis. So we've heard comments tonight about all these intersections, the cut-through streets. There needs to be an intersection, a study area that's broad enough to include all the potential problems that this project might create. There has to be site distance analysis. There needs to be trip counts. There's all the queuing length, we heard about queuing.
Right.
The capacity of the bridge to take the load. All of these things are covered within those state guidelines because it's really expansive, it's huge. And so our traffic engineer is gonna be looking at their traffic report and he's gonna have a checklist, he's gonna say, you didn't do that, you didn't do this, and then they go back and they say, oh, okay, you're right, I'll supplement that, and here's the new data. So I've learned, I'm just a lawyer, I'm not a traffic engineer, but I've learned this over the years, because I've done a lot of these projects, and I've picked this stuff up, and believe me, it's really, really intense. And so you're gonna be very happy, I think, when our traffic engineer looks at this, and there's a dialogue back and forth, and all of these comments are gonna be part of the record that the traffic engineers, both of them, are gonna be taking into consideration.
Right, I just wanna make sure there's common sense in this, it's not pure bureaucracy. Because we saw what happened in South Grafton on that redo of Main Street. Some of the corners that the state put in, they weren't listening to the people who lived there, right? I don't wanna see that happen here on Pleasant Street, they have to listen to us.
Thank you. Somebody else, yeah, ma'am?
I'm just gonna hold it.
That's fine.
Hi, Shannon Martin, 16 Sunrise Ave. I agree with my neighbors here in a lot of their comments, but my question is, why not the Upton Street development? Why are we taking such a big complex and putting it on Pleasant Street instead of Upton Street, which is a bit more of a main road, a bit more accessible to people? And I didn't know if you could answer that question. That's the Eastland Properties.
As we said before, the location of this project is within, 4/10 of a mile of existing multifamilies around that potential area. And when we actually came to the, in front of the boards before on both of our projects, we're not here for Upton Street. Like I said before, plans aren't finalized as of yet. That's the only reason why we continue with this other project here. Furthermore, not to say anything about Upton Street, but there seems to be some things that this is gonna be a low, I get the idea that it's gonna be like a low quality property. We're gonna own our properties, we're not flipping it, and we're not, fancy guys with ties come in here and say, oh, we're gonna flip that to so-and-so and sell it. That's gonna be my home, more or less, so that's my property, the apartments. With that being said, Upton Street, with this number of units here, 104, I believe Upton Street's 156. That gives us the opportunity to have an on-site staff that can be mobile from this particular site and the other site to keep an eye on everything. So if anything happens at the site or anything's not being maintained or whatever, kids are playing on Peter's Way or whatever's going on, we have it staffed accordingly. It's just not by itself. So that's mainly the reason.
So my point was just, I think the Upton Street's a better location for projects this big. I go into apartment houses all the time for a living, so I know exactly what you're talking about. This is just really big for our particular neighborhood, so I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Anyone else want to say anything? There's a blue shirt sleeve back there.
Bruce Whitney, 3 Gary Circle. Not that it means anything, but my family's over 7 generations of Grafton, so I feel a vested interest here. 2 things about traffic. Coming out of Grafton, I lived in Grafton Circle over 45 years. Coming out of that onto Pleasant Street, you look right to the Baptist Bridge and the blind corner coming off the hill down onto the bridge. Yes, there has been 1 death on there where they've missed the bridge completely. Over the years. The other one is, in the last 2.5 months, coming from Hudson Ave, taking a left-hand turn onto Pleasant Street, twice I've almost been hit there because no one goes 30 miles an hour on Pleasant Street. And when they make that corner, they cut it off to the lane of the traffic coming out of Hudson Ave. I think that's enough to say that we definitely need a serious review and a serious situation going on with the traffic on Pleasant Street. The other thing is, on your maps, you showed all that nice green land and trails and everything behind this new project. And it was alluded to that there was an egress out there to where people can walk to go to amenities, shopping or whatever. But I can tell you, by owning half an acre into the Quinsigamond River, it is green easement. The only egress out of that property, onto Pleasant Street again, is over my deck and down the driveway. So that fallacy of these trails and other avenues to get out is just not fact. It's not there to be done. I guess everybody else has said everything else about it. It's just 204 units. I'm not saying my backyard because I got plenty of separation from it. But that traffic on Pleasant Street, it's not going to be happy if somebody dies on that situation. It's current, never mind adding 200 more cars. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thanks, Steve. Sir in the back.
I know. Here comes the bad guy. Ed Frisbee, 25 Danielle Drive. I live in the development, Cronenberg, Chestnut Ridge, right across the street. Where Bill lives, I served on the Affordable Housing Trust with Peter Adams. We did some pretty decent half-hearted work. On the Affordable Housing Trust, Peter tried to get affordable housing built in Grafton because we know we need it, right? I'm not sure who this message is for exactly, because I know the tone and tenor of the room. We've got 100 people in here who are all against this. And this may well be the ballsiest thing I've ever done, standing up in front of here with people throwing eye daggers in my back here. But I do know this. I know that we need this housing. And I know that this development is happening one way or another. Because I think, as you probably suspect, and as I think Dan and I both know, there's no way DHCD is going back and ruling that we're out of safe harbor. And the idea that because GSX applied for some permits that they didn't pay for means that we've done our due diligence and our good deed in supplying housing to the people in this community that desperately need it is a farce. Those are paper homes. They don't exist for anybody. They don't exist for 30% of Grafton residents that are housing insecure. And by that I mean 30% of Grafton renters pay in addition of 30% of their monthly take-home on housing. Those are the people that get to live here. So if you deny this, what you're telling to those people is you don't care that traffic concerns are more important than their concerns about housing. I'm not saying traffic concerns are unimportant. Please don't misunderstand me. They're not unimportant. Safety concerns are important, and that's on you guys to address. And if I'm being perfectly honest with you, don't come in a room and tell us you're going to do a traffic study in July. Nobody's buying that. The issue in the room is we all travel behind school buses every morning to get out of there, and it slows people down. It's an inconvenience, and it can be a safety concern, yes, for people who have kids on the street who have to wake up at, in February, there's no light out there when they're out there, especially for the older kids, right? So do it in the wintertime, do it during school, do it in the fall. You've got 2 more months until school's out. Do it then and buy some credibility with the people here. That said, I travel up and down this road during rush hour in the morning. I come home at night. I'm sorry, I grew up in more of an urban environment, so maybe my tolerance for traffic is a little bit different from somebody who's been here for 7 generations. But the fact of the matter is, that's not a bad road. If you want to put in a speed bump in the middle of it, do that. And let people who need the housing live there. That's the problem. Governor Healy has said, Governor Baker has said, Governor Sununu in New Hampshire has said, these people have nothing in common other than their firm belief that housing is one of the single most important issues in the northeastern United States today. It keeps people from moving here for jobs that they need. It keeps people from leaving bad relationships or abusive relationships that they're in. It keeps people from paying their bills. It keeps people from getting their children quality educations. And all you need to do is put up with someone turning onto your street in order to give that additional person that housing that they could use.
So that's worth my life, right?
Sir,
no one's saying it's worth your life. This isn't life or death.
Through me, Mr. Frisbee.
This isn't life or death. Okay, it's never life or death. Now, there was a BU study done recently about why Massachusetts has a housing crisis, and we do. And I don't know if you guys know it or not, but we do. And if you don't know it, we need to have a meeting with the Affordable Housing Trust where we need to talk about this. But one of the reasons that we do is because this meeting happens before every ZBA in the state. This meeting happens before every planning board in the state. And in the aggregate, we are short about 100,000 housing units per year, which means that millions of people are housing insecure. Millions of people are in a situation where they have to choose between paying for medical care and paying for rent. That is life or death. That is real. So for that reason, I can't live across the street and look at this and go, yeah, I'm gonna deny that person the very same benefit that I got, which is the chance to live in a community that's gonna educate my kids, which is a chance to live in a community that's gonna be safe, okay? I don't understand, I fundamentally don't understand how you can live in Peters Way, how you can live on Christopher Drive, how you can live on Millstone, and then turn around and say, well, there's too much traffic on Pleasant Street now. Then move, you're one less car, if that's your concern. But right now, there are people all across the state and in this community that need this. If you deny this, they're gonna come back, and you remember that 160 unit slide? That's what's back next, okay? The opportunity for people in Grafton to have first shot at this, gone. That's real life. That's what you're looking at. None of this other stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak?
You're not welcome.
Hi, Julie Capizello, 34.
People, please, the lady would like to speak, let's give her some respect so she can.
Please repeat. I couldn't
Julie
hear.
Capizello, 34 Pleasant Street. So, in the essence of time, and I want to just thank everyone for being here, thank the board, thank Eastland, thank all my neighbors, the majority here, and I don't want to reiterate everything here, but I just want to ask, how are we all going to be notified about the next step? Number one. And then just to call out a couple things. The density, John, you did good math, but it's more likely about 34.6 units per acre. I know it doesn't matter because it's a 40B, but it is a little misleading, so I'll call that out. Eastland, you also said you held 7 select board meetings. I was part of a couple. I'd also like to understand what the definition of an abutter is. I live at 34. What's the yardage, I guess?
300 feet.
I'm probably just over that. So I don't think that the communication was out there a lot for the walkthrough. Would have loved to have been there. So I'll leave you with my first question. How are we going to be notified? And thank you for your time.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So before this hearing concludes for this evening, we will continue it to a date and time specified at that when we actually do the continuance. So at the end of each night, we will have a date and time for the next hearing. Now, if you're not here, if you miss the next hearing, you want to know when the third one is, you can always call our secretary and she'll be able to tell you. You can watch the tape, it's always filmed and will be available, reviewed afterwards as well. But that's probably the easiest thing to do is just give Katrina a call and ask and she'll be able to tell you. You can kind of keep an eye on the website for when we post our agenda, that sort of stuff, but probably just as easy to give Katrina a call.
Also, if you go to the webpage that I just pulled up, every time it gets continued, I will put on there, it's continued, the date, time, and location that it's continued to. So if we continue it tonight, tomorrow I will go into the office, it will be updated pretty much the next morning when it was continued, because I've got to book the rooms and everything else.
Can you sign up for notifications for new meetings as well?
Yeah.
On the website?
Yep.
So you can get notified that way.
Anyone else care to speak? All the way in the back, sir, and then the woman who had her hand up, you'll be next.
Hey guys. Jacob for Christopher Drive, I have the panoramic view of the property. First question is about...
I'm sorry, sir, what's your address?
4 Christopher Drive.
Thank you.
I live most of my life in rentals. So, if you know one thing about rental is they change owners and management every couple of years. So what guarantees that Eastland will not, they get tossed like a hot potato at some point. Once the first owner make their profit, then they start getting sold to others. So what guarantees that this is not gonna happen in this case? And it's never better management, it's always, they start raising rent, they start charging for parking, charging for trash, for heat and everything. So there's no guarantee. So if the economy changes, then if somebody comes and just pay them more money, or if it doesn't make sense to them to keep operating up the units, then they'll just sell them. And then they'll just get tossed from one management to the other, one owner to the other, and it's always bad for the people living in the apartments. So that's one point. The second point is for the open space itself. I think if there is any relevance to the open space to people living around that open space, then this would be a prime spot for open space. Because if you look across the town, I just eyeballed, I don't know for sure, but it seems like most of these dense units, rentals are going in the most dense parts of the town, whereas I see some of the really very exclusive lots being given to $1 million homes. For example, the Institute Road, if you look there, there is a full-blown deforestation going on next to the train station, and they're building $1.2 million homes there. So what is the town doing to guarantee equality when it comes to open space being spread out across the town, and not only putting density where it's already dense, but also doing the due diligence to find lots where they can spread out density and make town better for everyone. Last comment is about affordability. So you guys mentioned that for every market value home or apartment is built, then that will change the percentages, right? So in this case, they're already building, let's say, 75% market value. Or actually, what is it? Is it 10% affordable, 25% affordable? So in reality, only 10% of them are actually affordable. So the whole process is kind of degenerative. So they are introducing 75 unaffordable homes, and then only have 10 affordable. So that itself is already adding unaffordable housing or market value housing.
All right, so to your last point, first of all, it's 75 and 25. 75% market rate, 25% affordable. And what you just described, it's not degenerative, but it's not very progressive. For sale units. In the case of a rental property, which they're building, all of the units, all 104 will count towards our SHI numbers, the numbers of affordable houses, okay? It's not logical to me, but that's the way the law is written.
Yeah, but that's cheating, right? Because that's why we
I
have
agree.
a crisis today. We have the lows in the 60s, and
That's-
yet
that's-
we're
okay.
in a crisis.
That's the law.
Yeah.
So according to the 40B and the DHCD regulations, all of these units will count towards the affordable. So this development is not like a traditional for sale, right? Everything will count. So this will help get us closer to safe harbor again and the 10% that we need. As far as, spreading out density, that sort of stuff, I think that's a question for our planning board or our town planner. It's really not relevant to this hearing and what we're doing here today. The fact that there may or may not be developments in other sections of town, or, this is part of too much in one area, is not really relevant. And I don't know the answer to the question, I don't know if anyone here does, but I think it's really a good question for our town planner, for the planning board. I do know we have development plans and things like that that they're working on as well. And then your first question was as far as the guarantees. I hear what they're saying, I appreciate what they're saying, it's nice. This member of the board, and I think everyone else, understands that there is no guarantee that they hold it. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but we can't control who owns it. So, you know, yeah, I hear what he's saying, and quite frankly, I believe that that is in his intent. But
I
it's-
do too,
it's-
I'm
yeah,
really,
it's
very
not,
professional.
it's not really relevant.
Nothing against them.
And his circumstances can change next year and he has to sell it. And there is no guarantee that they will continue to own it. There is no guarantee.
Yeah, and in terms of open space, how do you guarantee that the end results will be this town, you will see disparity between, it's always people who have less wealthy, less to give, they're asked to actually give more, give away the little open space they
Sir,
have.
get closer to the
If you look at the golf course place, it's hundreds of acres of open area for which is great. But then I was walking for 1 hour there. It's all $1 million homes being built there. It doesn't look like there is equality in terms of where you put density, and those people enjoy the open space. You look at the Clearview, look at actually that the Institute Road is just so wrong. I was reading the state report that the whole law of half a mile from the train stations was actually born out of these mansions built around train stations at Wellesley and other towns. And what is Grafton doing? Building $1 million homes right next to the train station. So a 300 units there would have dwarfed any other development going into these rural and parts of the
First of all,
town.
there are a couple of big developments like this one planned for that area. But I don't have an answer to your question. As I said, I think it's a valid question for our planning board or our town planner whose job it is to focus on those sorts of things. Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, wait, no, in the back was gonna be next. Almost forgot. And then, sir, you'll be next.
Hi, Nancy Piccone, 3 High Point Drive. Say anything about that. Just very quickly, I did want to mention I've received about 25 messages tonight. The meeting did not broadcast on cable and did not broadcast, and I just wanted to make it part of the record. Have a great night.
Thank you. Sir? Yeah.
How you doing? Greg Panajotu, 4 Pleasant Street. Not to beat the dead horse on the safety and traffic issues, but I live right across the street from Tom, who spoke earlier, and we witnessed the issues. I have 3 telephone poles in front of my house. In the 12 years that I've lived there, all 3 of them have been hit by cars. Like you mentioned, there may be an opportunity to have the traffic planner for the town, or however that may work, to kind of hear some of these concerns prior to that meeting. If that's a possibility, I'd like to encourage it. I think there's a lot more comments from Pleasant Street residents on that, where it being such a narrow road and adding so much traffic to it, so.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bill, you may want to remind folks that they can submit written comments to the board, and you can email Katrina or send letters the old-fashioned way. But that's really the most effective way for our consultants to hear all these things. So what you just said, it's kind of harder to digest things when it's orally presented. It's a lot easier if it's written. So you can do that, and I encourage all of you folks to submit written comments on these concerns that you have.
I thought there was a hand in the back. Yes, sir.
Eric Solomon, 11 Cheryl Drive. We already submitted public comment. So the sewer pump station that would be in there, would you guys be responsible for the maintenance on that for perpetuity? Because other projects, the sewer pump stations have become the town's responsibility, and there's no specific funding to help for that.
Totally private on,
Forever.
paid by us.
Okay,
Yes, that's
that was
correct.
just one. I moved new to town. I was in Franklin before. I like the appeal of the town coming from Franklin, where it was, no one was out and about. Moving here, I'm in the Sunrise area. There's people walking all day, all night, not all night, but often. No, even 8, 9 o'clock. I run, so I leave my neighborhood. I can't do, more than 3 miles in my neighborhood, so I gotta go further. I go on Pleasant. I go with my wife. My wife was here earlier. She's been with my daughter now. My wife almost got hit right by Peters 3 weeks ago. It's not safe, we're gonna have these discussions, I don't wanna beat the dead horse, but it's definitely a valid concern, I just want you to consider that. As far as the rest of the place goes, I don't like the flat roof, I think an architecture would be better if we're stuck with it. And pretty much agree with what everyone else has said. That's all.
Right, I'm trying to wrap, oh, yes, go ahead.
Sorry, just going back to the last gentleman that came up here. That was actually a fantastic question that you asked. That was really good because.
Which one?
The
Which
guy
question?
right before
No,
that
which
guy.
question?
In regards to the street pole.
Okay.
Cars hitting the street pole. See, a question like that is really good because that's something I would have missed. Maybe there's something we can look at down at the intersection and say, you know what, National Grid has a pole that's too close to the road. Perhaps we could shift that pole another 5 feet into the right of way and it would help alleviate maybe an accident in the future. So I just want to recommend those are good points and we've noted it, but those are great comments to send to Katrina. So no, I appreciate it. That's all.
I would like to, our meeting curfew is at 10 o'clock. We can, with the board, extend that. I would like to try and wrap it up. We've been here a long night. Anyone else have any comments, any new information that hasn't been shared yet? I mean, it's a public hearing, you can say anything, but, all right. With that in mind, I think probably for next steps, Sam, one of the things we need to do is get this sent to peer review to Jeff. All right, as far as traffic study, we'll wait till they submit a new traffic study before we do peer review on that. But I think initially, let's get it to Jeff and
But for we could schedule the traffic study, or our review or public comment with our engineer.
You're right, we could prep for it. As far as traffic peer review, I remember Jeff provided somebody who wasn't so good, and I don't remember if that was for Prentice or another project. And I don't remember who did the peer review for Prentice.
MDM Transportation's, I've seen a few times in peer reviews for you.
Not for us. Here?
Or maybe they would get with the applicant's traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be.
There's really not a lot of good options for traffic peer reviewers. Gary Hebert did Prentice.
Okay.
Did you like him or not?
Gary, you liked it,
I
was the
think,
one.
I think it was the one before that,
Yeah.
that Jeff Walsh had recommended, and I think by the end of even.
So I can ask Gary, he might be retired, and that's why I say that a lot of the guys that have done this in the past have moved on, they've gone to the developer side, and they don't like to do this anymore, so I'll ask around.
Yep, okay, thank you. What do we, probably give Jeff 4 weeks, maybe reschedule this next meeting for 4 weeks from now.
Jeff has, I don't disagree, Jeff has had the plans for 7 to 10 days, but.
But he hasn't, I don't think he's looked at them.
No, probably not, and no pressure, I just want you to know that they have been provided to Jeff.
Yeah, thank you.
You have the deposit for peer review.
I was just about to ask that, do we have the fund?
Yep.
Okay. Just a couple of comments from me individually. I'm also not, what? Okay, we'll get to,
I was just gonna say, could your guy look at the tape instead of having 100 people make comments to the secretary?
No, well, I've got them written down.
Okay, all right. So I have a couple of comments. One, I'm not a fan of the flat roofs either. And I really like what we managed to get Prentice to do, and that was to collapse the top floor into a gable roof, okay? That, I think they lost some density when they did that, but I just think that that's a much more, an angled and gabled roof is much more appealing looking. And I'm not sure where the idea of the flat roofs being better came from. But this member of the board doesn't like those. What I hate even more, and I'll do everything I can to put language in there to stop it, is if you go by Prentice Place and you see all those units on the roof, right? It's an absolute, it's disgusting. Just so everybody knows, the developer agrees, and he's trying to figure out what he's gonna do about it. So If you don't know what I'm talking about, drive by Prentice Place, it's across from Nelson Park. Right,
I agree.
Yeah, the architecturals are very, very conceptual.
No, I
There
understand.
was a push at first, that they wanted to bring the height down, so we
yeah,
gladly look at architectural. They're like 10%, so that's not a problem at all.
Yep, okay. Yeah, so those are two comments from me. Any other comments from the board? Yep, go ahead, Mr. Adams, where's the?
When you redo the traffic count, if we could have, I would like to see a counter before Hudson Ave. And maybe one on,
Going which way, Peter?
when you're going towards Providence Road, one before Hudson Ave, because a lot of traffic in the morning might be going over Hudson, and if you have a counter up the street past the bridge, they might not be getting to the intersection at Providence Road. So I mean, I'm on Brigham Hill and I'm getting a lot of traffic. And it's probably because of the high school at 7 o'clock in the morning. People don't want to get into that circus down there with the cars and the buses.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that. I mean, at the end of Pleasant, it splits into, what is it, Pullard and whatever, right? So I hope they're looking at that intersection, but I think a substantial amount of traffic turns left or turns onto Hudson, either to avoid the lack of traffic light at the end of Pleasant, or to head towards the high school, or even up and over Brigham Hill, as Peter said. So I think a lot of the traffic goes that way. I know that.
Well, they might go for the lights on Millbury Street.
That's what I'm saying, they go Hudson to Millbury, so at least now they have the benefit of a light to turn on to Providence, or they go right across and they're going to the high school, or they're going up and over Brigham
And if
on the way to the
we
Pike.
could have one on Pullard Road also.
Well, that's the end, right?
No, Pullard goes to the right after the bridge.
That's what I'm saying, I think both ends, Pullard, and then what's the other one? Is it Pleasant goes right to?
Pleasant goes
Yeah, so
straight.
Pleasant and Pullard, both of them.
So I guess we're talking 3 counters.
Yeah, no, I think
Well, I
they,
mean, a lot of people would go Pullard and then go up South Street.
yeah, no,
From
I
Street to
no, I
South
agree.
Street.
I think both of those need to be understood.
Whether we need one going towards South Grafton, they probably do that anyways, but I think South Grafton tends to get less traffic. But I'm not positive.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? All right, I saw 2 hands, real briefly, please, or right here, and
Real
then
quick.
you'll be next in the back.
Yeah. John Morrow, 54 Pleasant. Remember, we have 100 units in South Grafton that will be coming up Pleasant. Who knows how many of those will be coming up too?
Understood.
Are those units gonna be counted as part of it?
Traffic counts are supposed to take into account underdevelopment units as well.
Okay, I just want
99%,
to bring that up. There's another
Yeah,
100
no,
units up there.
Understood.
Okay, thank you.
Sir?
Just a technical question on the counters. Do they keep, is it done by date and time, everything, or is it just simply a count?
No, it's date and time. It's absolutely, it's date
Okay,
and
I just wanted to be clear
Sir?
so that we
Yeah.
could go
Sir?
through that.
I need your name.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ken Swadrak, 52 Sunrise Ave.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Okay, thanks.
All right,
Can we do a count on our own on another property, like on McGillis? To see how many come out, that's 100 units. Just to see how many,
yeah, I don't think we can ask them to do it.
no, I'm not asking them to do it, can we do it?
I don't think we can ask them to have our peer review pay for it, you know. You can ask those folks in the front row to fund it. Well, I'm serious, we would have to get funding for something like that somewhere. All right, any other comments from the board? Do we look at our calendars and we shoot for 4 weeks, hopefully back onto a Thursday night?
We have one in 4 weeks, I
Do we really?
So, we do, we have April 27th, we have the 248s. So here's the thing, if we come up here, we have to go in May, because April vacation week, they have events scheduled up here the whole week. The problem we have is Conference Room A only handles 48 people. That's 48 people total, including my board, including the applicant, including Bill.
Did anybody take a count tonight?
I didn't, but I had 106 chairs set up.
It's probably about 30 empties. Say it again?
Around 80, so it's gonna tell the library.
All So there's about 80 people here. Right?
Okay, so
So we need to be here.
we need to be here, so that puts us the first week of May. I am not here from the 3rd to the 5th of May.
We're here the 27th.
The 27th, we have,
What about the 20th of April?
that's April vacation week, we can't use this room. It's April vacation week,
Because they're,
it's school vacation week. They've got events up here that the library is holding. I checked with Beth before the meeting.
Is school available if school's on vacation?
I could check, but we'd have to.
yeah, we need to know now.
We need to know it now,
So if you're looking at May 4th,
and
we
I'm
have to
not
do it
here.
without you.
I'm not here.
We're gonna have to do it May 4th without you. Because I'm gonna get into a problem. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna do away for a couple of weeks later in May. Is everyone else available on May 4th on the board?
Yep.
I think we, so I heard somebody say the 26th of April, so we do 2 nights in a row? I don't know.
No.
Yeah, all right, so the board's in agreement. We don't want to do May 4th.
So the other option, Bill, is.
No, we have a meeting the
We have a
27th.
meeting. The other option is if we use the gym, the only thing with the gym is we have no audiovisual. We can just have a meeting, Bill can tape it, but we have no audiovisual at all whatsoever in the gym.
We don't have old school, like those things on a cart and a screen you can pop up.
I can look, I can try. I mean, I can't guarantee if there's just not
But
the
we may not
technology.
need it. Well, no, Jeff doesn't necessarily need it, although you have full-size prints?
Yes.
So, I mean, you can use easels and full-size prints and point stuff if we have to. So that would be the gym for the 20th?
I can double check tomorrow, and I should be able to get it. I don't know what rec has in there, but I can tell them they've gotta pull it out.
But that's school vacation.
Yeah.
Is the 20th okay with everybody?
20th of
April?
April,
In the gym.
well, we get back into April.
I don't want you to speak for Jeff, but being an engineer, I mean, that should be enough time for him, right?
He's had the plans, I know.
I can't do the
He hasn't, I told him not to look at it, so he hasn't looked at it.
Hasn't studied.
I
I don't know what, I know he's busy, I mean,
I can email him tomorrow, I can call him tomorrow.
Let's go for the 20th. Let's go for the 20th. In worst case, we don't do anything, or we have a brief meeting and we continue
You
again.
can always continue it, right?
Yeah,
So the 20th in the gym?
20th in the gym.
With Bill, I won't be here.
Oh, wait, time out.
Yeah, I can't do the 20th.
All right, well, I don't want to lose a member this early. May 4th, is everyone available May 4th?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's go for May 4th. Let's go for May 4th here. Katrina?
Yep.
How instrumental were you in setting up? I mean, probably you guys.
I set it up.
I'm so sorry, I
One of us
can't,
will have to do it.
I'm so sorry, I can't do May 4th.
we're locked in
I
on
have a
May 4th.
conference.
So the whole week's out? Or,
No, just that, just that meeting.
okay, what about the 3rd? 3rd. The 3rd? May 3rd. May 3rd.
I'm really sorry about that, thank you.
No, it's okay. Better to hear it now than 5 minutes from
It's
now.
hard to get us all the same.
It is unfortunate. By the way, we need another alternate member. What, why?
I don't think you want anybody.
Actually, we do, so, you know.
Say that, you ain't get elected.
No, we do, we do. I mean, look how much fun we have.
Once you get paid.
Now I've lost track. Are we in May 3rd?
May 3rd.
All right, so I entertain a motion to continue case number 892 to May 3rd at 7 p.m. here in the library.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made, seconded, any discussion?
Where, here?
Here, in this, right here,
And this right here.
this building, this building, I assume this room. Ms. Rennie?
Yes.
Mr. Waller?
Yes.
Mr. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Yeomans?
Yes.
Chairman votes yes. Vice Chairman, wherever I am. All right, it's your show, Mr. Waller. I think we're done.
Yeah.
Don't even
We
mention
don't,
this.
it was adjourned, right?
I need a motion to
What?
Bill made it.
I move we adjourn.
Motion made second. Mrs. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Gilman?
Yes.
Mr. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Custer?
Yes.
Chairman votes yes, we're adjourned.